statistically we're getting lonelier and sicker and fatter and more diabetic. And then you're living in a culture that's going insane.
And that's what we describe as depression. And I think that's where the financial aspect connects to the psychological aspect.
Most people are experiencing some version of Stockholm Syndrome to modern culture. And you feel like you need all of these things that are in fact making you sick.
And it's ultimately unfulfilling. You land in the domain of purposelessness.
Do you think there is a quantity of money that it actually just becomes detrimental to your quality of your life?
When you're in an asymmetric position over other people, it's difficult to maintain that loving, Christ-like demeanor.
And the concept that we should be afraid of the sun, to me, feels very suspicious.
That's insanity.
It's a photonic food for your cells because it's a physical thing that your body consumes.
I don't know what it is. It's social media, digital communication, peer-to-peer communication, like all this ancient wisdom is kind of bubbling up to the surface again.
Oh, interesting. Like maybe I need a relationship with something that I consider to be God.
So we were just talking about, the definition of psychological depression as someone that doesn't have hope for the future. So they often say they have trouble getting out of bed. You mentioned that there's like a physical description of it where they're like being brought down.
Yeah, to depress is to pull down.
Yes.
Anatomically, like you could elevate your shoulders and depress your shoulders, which is good. But then also that generally a person, if you look at any person sitting in front of a desk all day long, inside of a house, staring into their phone, just this general modern lifestyle that we've been habituated to be normal. If you were to see a primate, or really any animal that looks like a human, I guess pretty much as primates, in that position, hunched over, kind of forward head posture, looking into the phone, knees collapsed in, feet collapsed in, and you didn't have a definition understanding of like, oh yeah, they're just scrolling Instagram, I get it. You'd be like, oh, for sure that primate is either sick or sad.
Yes.
That's it.
For sure.
Now humans, you see this huge epidemic of sickness and sadness.
Right.
Like what's going on?
Yeah. Is it psychosomatic then? You're probably even signaling to your body when you're in that position that you're sad, right? If you're hunched over the keyboard all the time.
Yeah, there's like the research that you've seen everybody has, because it's like one of the most popular TED videos was with Amy Cuddy, the Harvard researcher, and she did the power woman poses, and she found that by being in an upright shoulder back position, there's a almost like a muscle memory / like endocrine memory of when I'm in these certain positions. Naturally, every person wins a race the exact same way. They bring their shoulders back, they pop their chest out. If you win a fight in the UFC, do the same thing. You stomp around, your shoulders start swinging, and everything loosens up. And so what she found with that is they did saliva samples, and they found people being in these upright, shoulders back, like aligned positions. They would increase their testosterone levels. If I remember right, I think it was like 12.5%, but don't quote me on that part. And they would reduce their cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone that everybody knows about. And this has happened in like minutes. This is like real time. So we're tuning the instrument that is our body through these postural patterns, and the body is almost like an antenna that gives and receives information to the world and also to ourselves.
So interesting. It's also very deeply evolutionary, right? That you see this in the animal kingdom.
That's how we communicate.
Yeah.
There's a thing called sorry for interrupting, there's a thing called the 55-38-7 principle of body language. And the suggestion, this is like some research from like the 60s or 70s, but the suggestion is that 55% of our communication comes through body language, and then 38 comes through the tone of our language, and then there's the 7%, which is the actual words that we're speaking.
Right.
And so that would be if there is conflict between my tone and my body language with the words that I'm saying, you're going to say, this guy's full of shit.
Yeah.
So there's 7% of the information is like, oh yeah, cool, like the words and words. But what we actually care about is the more deeper human connection with each other. And I think that's a part of, Alan Watts has a bit where he talks about how we're, we're starving as a society because we're eating the menu instead of the meal.
Yeah.
So when you're getting all this digitized information, you're having these parasocial relationships and you're staring into flat screens and you're getting, not to mention like the radiation and all the other stuff happening simultaneously. You have the experience, this artificial experience of human connection.
Right.
But really the thing that drives the human are those, like pheromones and body language and tone. We're like tuning each other's nervous systems. We're like massaging each other's nervous systems just by like hanging out.
Yeah. But because we are energetic beings, right? So that your vibratory pattern influences mine and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And there's like I guess it's a coherence thing, right? That if, as you were saying, what was it? It was words, body language,
55-38-7.
Yeah, if there's coherence between them, then you could almost say that's like a very high signal. That's going to impart authenticity, right? Like, he appears like he's saying this. The tone says he's saying this, and the words say he's saying this. Then we get these 3 points of consilience.
Green light.
Yes, green light. It's legit.
Yeah.
I think this also explains why conversations on the podcast are so much better in person. Mm-hmm. That you just have the human energy that you can't possibly transmit through screens.
Yeah.
I also have noticed, and I've read a little bit about this, but I retain so much less when I read on my Kindle versus when I read a physical book. That's kind of in a different domain a little bit, but something about that physical book causes me to retain information better than reading it through.
You're activating more aspects of the brain. There's texture and there's feel and there's if you want to, I just remember this from college classes from a long time ago, but if you want to remember things, if you're studying for something, it's important to incorporate any version of emotionality into it that you can. Mm-hmm. So if you can tie things back into past experiences, that's kind of like the concept of a memory palace.
Yes.
So you tie whatever you're trying to remember back into like a room in your house that you actually have an emotional connection to, incorporating colors, incorporating sound, incorporating weight and texture. Mm-hmm. All of that like enlivens the body and the mind to be able to actually hold that information compared to something that's just, two-dimensional digital letters.
That's amazing. Yeah, so the emotional salience plays like a major role in retention and engagement.
And just like joie de vivre of life.
What is that word?
Joie de vivre.
What is that?
You know what joie de vivre is. That's not a smart person word. It's like
some fancy French shit I've never heard.
Yeah, it's fancy French shit. Joie de vivre means like zhuzh. I don't know.
De vivre is of life.
Something, and then de vivre,
joy of life.
And then de vivre certainly
I took
means
French
life.
for 4 years. I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Is joie joy? The joie.
He said it's joy.
The joie.
Yeah, de vie is definitely of life.
It's funny all the things we say. We don't know what the fuck we're saying. Joie de vivre, bro. Come on.
Yeah, so the opening thing, I was trying to draw the through line between because we just had a conversation. You were interviewing me basically about Bitcoin money and all this stuff. And I think it's interesting that we, again, psychological depression is like this person that struggles to see a good relationship with their future selves. Like they have little hope for the future. They don't have a clear path to upward mobility or mobility towards what it is they want in life. And that's what we describe as depression. And I think that's where the financial aspect connects to the psychological aspect. In that, if you're working a job and your wages aren't keeping up with inflation, for instance, and so you're working harder and harder, but getting further and further behind, well, then that puts you in that psychological orientation that there's no hope for the future. Mm-hmm. Whereas if the opposite is true, and the harder you work and the more you save, the more your savings grows and compounds, well, then you're more likely to be on that upward trajectory and not suffer from depression.
Yeah.
And so, I wonder to what extent that's true, I guess. And it's funny to me too that we use the word economic depression, the Great Depression of 1929, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, there's no hope for the future. We don't know where the resources are going to come from. We don't know how we're going to rebuild things. There's an economic depression that creates a lot of psychological depression, right? People are out of work, they're starving, they can't make ends meet, et cetera. So again, it's funny that we use these words in different domains, but there's a reason why. There is a through line between them.
Well, depression, so to like a few things, I think there's different ways to look at things. There's like the bottom up way, and then there's the top down. There's probably maybe even some other different ways to go in as well. But the bottom up version of depression, a person could look at really simple, obvious things like exposure to sunlight or exercise. And that's something that has been, I'm sure you've seen research around this, but exercise is shown to be more effective than antidepressants on like moderate to mid depression. Things like severe depression is outside of my scope to have a strong opinion about. But just a person moving their body is sending an indication to their physiology that something is going right, something is going well. And even if it's not going that well, I'm at least moving myself to safety. Yeah. And that's a similar thing with, I'm spacing the acronym for the therapy where they do the eye scanning. It's like the eyes go back and forth, and I'm spacing the name for it right now.
I don't know the name of that either.
Anyways, there's a type of therapy. Everybody listen to it. I sound like a big dumb gorilla. I don't know what that's called right now, but there's a type of therapy that they are a part of it is the eyes scanning, and then they're going through. I've never actually done it myself. I've just like read about it and heard about it. But the suggestion was that therapy originated from, I believe it was a woman, and the original idea came from just taking a walk, going for a hike. Naturally, you're going to be scanning the environment as you're moving forward through space. And that sends a signal to like untie yourself from a potential freeze state or depressed or collapsed state. And your body says, okay, cool. Like we're moving towards progress. I feel a little bit better about this situation. And, success is contagious. Yeah. Like people want to be around something that feels resonant and feels like I don't know what it is about being around that guy or girl, but like I just feel better. Yeah. And if a person is in a collapsed, victimized, pasty, pale, static, like hoarding tissue, in various different ways. Yeah. All of those are indicators of like, there's something maligned in that factory, in that system. That's not a business that I want to be investing in. Yeah. And so this is all deep mammalian, reptilian brain stuff where we're reading, you're seeing facial gestures and patterns and postural patterns and all of that. Like you have a mammalian brain in the world of, this might be too fancy and unnecessary, but there's a thing called Polyvagal Theory that you might have heard of. I just did a podcast on my podcast, a Lime podcast, about with the founder or the creator of the Polyvagal Theory called Stephen Porges. And within the polyvagal theory, he refers to the way that the vagus nerve, which vagus, the etymology of that would come from like vagabond, like wandering. So the vagus stems at the 10th cranial nerve, and it wanders through pretty much innervating almost every organ throughout your entire body. Something interesting about that is 80% of the nerve pathways are afferent, meaning they're sending information from the guts, from the organs up to the brain. So if it was a highway, the vagus nerve is the biggest, most robust, hugest nerve in the whole body. If it were a highway, 80% of the lanes would be going from the body to the brain, with a little 20% of the lanes going down from the brain to the body, which is really cool and interesting. Yeah. And it kind of takes you into a place of like, oh shit, I thought I was just like this like floating brain inside of like a vacuous space. A distributed brain. Yeah, but I'm actually more of a body that informs the brain. And the way that I communicate actually is more of a bodily type communication. Then you get into the pheromonal stuff and all of that. But so in the polyvagal theory, if a person feels safe, then they'll be activating more the ventral side of the nervous system, so ventral being front. And so your face relaxes, you can like smile, the tone of your voice shifts, you probably talk a little bit more, maybe a little bit deeper, maybe a little bit more slow. You express. That's a safe ventral tone body, ventral like polyvagal stuff. If a person is going into a collapse, which they could also go into sympathetic response, which now they're going to go into a place of blood will shunt from the organs, go into the periphery and prepare the person for fighting or running or defending situation. The next range, depression, going into like numbness, collapse, disassociation, that would be dorsal body, so that's kind of like I hunch over. I think if you got your ass kicked, have you ever gotten your ass kicked?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if you got your like ass, I've never been properly ass kicked, thankfully, but I've been around it. And if you were to really properly get your ass kicked, you would fold up into a fetal position, and you suddenly, your back and your spine and your ribs would act as a protective shell. So that's the dorsal body will come online and just maybe store all that tension in the back of the body. And then to be able to express and come online and feel safe, suddenly we activate more of that ventral front side. The reason I'm saying all that now, I'm kind of going down another path, but like what came up to me in that conversation with Dr. Porges was you can almost like dehumanize the person. You can oscillate myopically into, the human and say, hey, my name is Mike. These are all my stories. These are my parents, all that stuff. And then you can kind of start to come out, or maybe even go more myopic, depending on how you see it, and be like, this is also a mammal, a Homo sapien mammal.
Right.
And they're running on all these millions of year old systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've been releasing cortisol and adrenaline and all of that the exact same freaking way for millions and millions of years.
Yeah.
And now suddenly we put together language and we have things like Bitcoin and cell phones and all that stuff, but we're still the same mammal brain.
Yes.
And so the way that we are expressing ourselves, like that's the base of the iceberg that actually matters.
Right.
And then there's the very top of the iceberg, which is like the definitions that we apply.
The data. Right. Because that's...
Does that make sense? Or is that like too...
No, it's perfect. Because, we evolve in layers. So we have a lot of ancient subsystems, right? The reptilian brain is even lower down than the mammalian brain. And then I guess prefrontal cortex.
It's like the human. Yeah, that's like what makes us, that's what separates us from other primates.
But the communication that we're having is occurring across all layers, right? So even though there's verbal, explicit communication, there's also all this implicit levels of
unless you're really stressed out, in which case blood transitions away from the front and goes into the hind brain.
Right.
And so
then you start in an argument with your girlfriend.
That's that reactivity where you lose control.
Yeah.
I experienced it last night actually talking to my ex-girlfriend.
The anger.
Where I'm like, holy shit. Yeah. I actually saw, it's really interesting. I saw a video of myself. We're launching a breathing program, which maybe at some point I can like mention at the very end or whatever, because it's really important in relation to all that stuff, because breath is the bridge to all of this. It's so interesting and amazing. But I was doing the sales video for it, and I was recording at my place, and then I'll have like, the editing team, they'll put B-roll, all this stuff, but doing like the main sales video. And then my dog was eating something and they like messed something up. It was like a little pot, whatever thing. And I got like mad. And when you just get mad within yourself, you're like, yeah, of course, I got mad, whatever the thing was. But I was like genuinely like, this pisses me off. But I accidentally filmed myself getting up and being mad. And I saw myself and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like you're out of control, bro.
Yeah.
But you can't feel it when you're in that
you don't
moment.
See yourself.
For you, this is normal. This is right. This is justified. I am like, all I know is all I know is nothing at this point, because I'm being controlled by millions of years of evolution and my parents and ancestry and traumas and all that stuff starts like coming to the surface. But it was actually a little alarming to see the video of me getting mad at it. I didn't do anything wrong. It was just like watching my face.
You watch yourself go down the subsystems, right? And
I watched, yes, exactly. It was a little embarrassing.
The one that gets angry, it stops maturing at like the age of 5 or something. So you basically turn into a toddler.
Right. Exactly.
Like there's no rationally talking to you about whatever you're mad about in that moment.
Yeah.
You have to actually let the anger pass. And it is astoundingly difficult, I think, to train yourself to be able to catch yourself in those moments. It's very simple, right? It's like once you feel that dragon start to come up, it's like, oh, I'm getting angry. I need to take some space, take a walk, do some breathing. But there's this, for me, it's usually like in an argument with someone, there's such a temptation to engage, right? Because you're like, whatever the thing is.
It feels good. It's almost addictive.
Yeah.
It's like a dopaminergic thing.
It is dopaminergic, yeah. And then, but guaranteed, if you engage in that time, again, you're in the mind of a toddler. You're not going to make any
You're only going to make things worse.
You're going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the big repeated lesson in maturing is like trying me trying to catch myself in those moments and then like take space. And it's way easier said than done.
Oh yeah. Have you ever created, this might get a little overly interpersonal, but it's kind of fun. Have you ever damaged things to an irreparable degree in a loss of control, in that sense, where you're like, your reactivity, you say things where you're like, ooh, I can't really come back from that.
In interpersonal arguments, yeah, I've definitely said things I would wish I could take back, right? I mean, I assume everyone had done that at some point. Maybe I'm wrong about that assumption, but yeah, I've said things that I wish I could take back for sure. As far as like, but I don't think I've ever irreparably damaged a relationship with that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe like girlfriends from my younger years, we didn't work out, so you could say that was a contributing factor for sure.
Isn't that wild that you can like fracture a relationship with a word?
With words, yeah. It's
wild.
And it's more than just the words, probably, right? It's the energy
tone,
when you're saying
energy. Yeah, it's like we're casting spells. Like it's like
and I think again, as a younger man, that you tend to be, well, you're just less experienced and maybe hyper rational too, and kind of your over testosteronized younger years. When I'm having arguments with the girl I was dating in my early 20s, for instance, it's like, I'm thinking the words need to be correct, right? Like, what are you saying? And what do I mean? Like, I think she means what she's saying, but like, women, especially when they're arguing, they can't, not to generalize, they can be very careless with their words because it's not about words. It's about
the emotion.
It's the emotion needs. It's not what you're saying. It's how you're saying it.
And if you don't hear me and see me, but it's not just hearing and seeing my words, it's hearing and seeing like the deep subterranean emotional experience that only I can really know exactly what this is. But if I don't feel seen and heard in that from you, it's going to make me,
Yes. And as a young man who had not done much self-work at that time, I'm just like, what are you talking about?
What do you mean? Exactly.
What I'm saying and how I say it. Like, it doesn't matter how I say it as long as the word's correct, right?
Which comes back to breath.
Yeah.
So if that's like one of the most 100%, like there is no tool more powerful than coming back to understanding the breath, but understanding it from a very pragmatic, scientific, physiological lens. When you are when you go into that reactive state, you'll notice your breath shorten. You'll notice you'll go more into an inhalatory pattern. When you inhale, you're increasing the speed of the heart rate.
Yeah.
Reason being is you're descending the diaphragm in order to you pull the diaphragm down like a plunger, and that opens up, that creates more space, pulls the lungs down, creates a vacuum, air goes in. And you're also creating more space and volume within the chambers of the heart and all the blood vessels. And so then you have these neurons that act as a pacemaker in the heart. They say, okay, we're going to speed things up a little bit. These tubes are getting so dang wide.
Yeah.
And then when you are exhaling, diaphragm ascends, comes up, everything gets tight, you slow things down.
Yeah.
And so when you go into that, think if you ever get scared, the way that you get scared, you go, right? Yeah. Once you realize like, it's fine. You thought you had chlamydia. It's just a rash. It's fine. You go, cool. We're good.
Yeah. Even the colloquial thing where we were like, whew, dodged the bullet. Yeah.
Yeah. Or laughing.
Yeah.
It's a purging of energy.
Yeah.
Like you've built up so much energy in yourself because laughter usually comes from like kind of surprise in the nervous system. Something like comedy is not funny if you know what they're going to say.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you already know you already know the punchline of the joke, the comedian's just not that smart, or you're really smart.
Yeah.
They're just predictable.
Yeah.
And you're like, I can't laugh at this because you're not setting me up for a surprise.
Yeah.
But you set yourself up for the surprise. You go there and your nervous system goes, that was stimulating and surprising. And you off-gas energy through exhalation.
Yeah. It's so freaking cool. The other one I picked up on, this was
I just did it.
From in yoga, where the more you slow your exhale, that you can, I guess maybe the only way that you can consciously slow your heart, right? Like we don't have a lot of control over our heart rate.
Conscious bridge between the autonomic and the somatic nervous system.
Yes.
Somatic being I actively move the thing, autonomic being kind of out of my control. Unless you're like Swami Rama, various different monks and people of the sort, that's yogis that are able to change and control their autonomic systems, such as regulating temperature of their front of their hand to the back of their hand, or putting themselves into essentially like a comatose state
right.
just through the depth of, their meditation and breathing and all that stuff. So that we can, even the idea of autonomic has nuance to it.
Sure.
But the breath is the very clear bridge between the autonomic and somatic. Any, whatever, human of any sort, like we're doing that all the time.
Yes. And then I've noticed, again, when I got into yoga early 20s, yoga teachers would be saying, all right, slow down the exhale basically to get your heart rate down, and it helps you not need to take a rest pose. You can keep moving through the motions basically.
Yeah.
And I learned to sort of import that into the business environment. If I'm in like a high stress meeting or giving a board presentation or whatever it was, like, you get the nervous feeling, and it's like you just learn to like take that really slow exhale.
Yeah.
And you can sort of just tune down the whole system, and then you get much more relaxed and you just present better. Whereas if you don't have that technique, you're like,
if you want to sell, because we're always selling, anytime you walk into a room, you're pretty much subconsciously selling yourself, whether you're aware or not, to every person in the room. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
And the thing, if you actually have a physical thing outside of just yourself or whatever, but you have a widget or whatever the thing is, or an idea or concept, if you are nervous about your concept, that will create nervousness in the other people.
For sure.
And no one's going to want to invest money into a thing where it might not even be that I'm detecting you as being nervous. It's just you make me nervous.
Sure. Exactly.
I feel nervous.
Yeah.
I don't feel, suddenly everything literally contracts.
Yeah.
Pupils dilate. I go into myopia.
Yeah.
Blood comes out of the viscera and organs, goes out of rest and digest and all that stuff. And like, I literally want to leave the room right now just because of the way that you're breathing.
Yeah.
Like,
and people can
go.
And people can interpret that as their own gut feeling when it's really just kind of this mimetic pattern as you're describing. It's like, because this one, that was also a big lesson, is like, well, we're both big guys, right? We're 6'4", you're a little taller than me, same weight, 230 pounds. I'm an introverted person. So when I would go into these social settings as late teenager, early 20s, like I was a little nervous, like kind of had social anxiety at a young age. And it took me a while to figure out that because I have such a prominent physical presence, that energy that I had would really be infectious with people. And so one of the techniques I learned was focusing a lot on the other person, like exclusively on the other person, and like really what they're trying to say, and like really try to, mind meld with them. It doesn't leave you any bandwidth to have that kind of social anxiety.
Yeah, right.
And so that helped me sort of diffuse my nervous energy, and then you could connect with people a lot better. And then people pick up on your energy. It's like when your energy is in a good place, because you're such a big broadcaster of energy, I guess, that it really tends to be infectious and influential on the room. Yeah,
it's probably why a lot of people, myself included, experience more anxiety and maybe feelings of like maybe occasional sensation of whatever, just badness, contractedness, loneliness, kind of purposelessness. Even if you're technically doing some stuff, maybe there's like a deeper sensation that I experience regularly. I'd imagine you probably do, based off of the things that you're into. Kind of like, what are we actually doing here? And what is the purpose and function of anything? And does anything actually matter in the world, in this like largely kind of plasticized, fabricated world that I live in? Like, what actually matters here?
Yeah, I think the intellectual side of myself definitely has been down that path several times. And it did change for me when my daughter was born. It's like you all of a sudden.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Once your energy goes out from focusing exclusively on yourself, and you can see 100 different images of yourself on the Instagram, and then you can see your post that you put on the X or Twitter or whatever, and then you can see your Facebook, and then you like whatever. And it's just these images of yourself projected back to yourself.
Yeah.
Then you go through your camera roll. You're like, oh, I'm on the flight. I'm gonna go through and delete some of my old memories. Like you had it's so much you.
Yes. And that's the problem.
Freaks you out.
And that's the problem.
And once you can bring your energy out from yourself and put it into, how can I be of support? How can I be more generous? How can you've seen all like the studies and the research of, when you're being generous, when you're helping other people out, it makes you feel better.
Yes.
And there's like a physics or metaphysics to that. You need to get out of yourself. Ironically, if you want yourself to feel good, you got to get the heck out of here.
100%. I completely agree. And also
spend time with yourself, but intentional quiet time.
Yes.
So like that's another layer is like, okay, get out of yourself, pour your energy out, be generous, be purposeful, be of support, like create that sensation of like, oh yeah, like I actually, because I think that creates a feeling of I have value to the tribe, which creates a sensation of safety.
Of course.
Because ultimately like your nervous system is very binary. It's either I'm safe or I'm under threat.
Right.
The more time you can spend in safety, the more time your nervous system switches every system over into healing.
Yeah.
The more time you spend in threat, the more your nervous system switches everything over into release adrenaline, release cortisol, release all these things to just, I just need to get out of this day.
Yes.
I just got to make it through this day.
Yes.
I don't care about next week. I don't care. And that's when you talk to the wealthiest people, which, you know, you've been exposed to a lot of wealthy people with how much you put into Bitcoin, you probably experience like an evolution in your perspective of wealth as well. Your perspective goes from, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do an hour from now, to I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do a week from now, to I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do 10 years from now, to I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do for generational wealth.
That's right.
To then it's like, oh, but that's a product of deep safety.
Yes, absolutely. And that is the time preference we were talking about in the last conversation. And an essential ingredient of that deep safety is financial security, right?
That's one of them.
You can't think 10 years into the future if you're worried about paying bills next month, right? Like your sphere of concern is shrunken, basically.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that, maybe this has got to be an evolutionary thing as well, that we're just hardwired to cooperate, right? That I think Marcus Aurelius said something like humans are like the left and right hand or the rows of the upper and lower teeth. Like we're designed to fit together and help one another. And if you're not doing that, if you're not adding value to other people's lives and you're excessively focused on self, and like I've been there, right? I've been vain, egoic, self-centered kind of direction. And it's ultimately unfulfilling. And it ultimately leads you to an aimless place. Because like even if you do succeed on that track, you have financial success and social success in terms of social status, whatever it may be, and you're doing whatever you want. Like that was a big focus for me when I was in my early 20s. You get to this place where it's just for naught, right? It's like, you're like, okay, I did all those things, but now you land in the domain of purposelessness.
Well, it can actually be even worse because previously you had the illusion that I'll be happy when, and then suddenly the veil gets pulled back and you're like,
nothing
oh
else.
no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Exactly. You get to the top of that upward mobility track.
It's just me.
And then there's nothing in front of you. Yeah. It's a weird thing. But then you have a kid and you're like, oh, it like shifts your, and maybe this is just specific to like, I mean, kind of like a hard charging individualist type male, right? And I also don't have the greatest upbringing. I didn't have this super structured, this is the pattern for your life. So I was figuring it out on my own. Maybe this doesn't apply to people that have really good upbringings, but you do get to the end of that upward ascent and then you find that there's no more upward to ascend to. And that leaves you, I don't want to say depressed, but definitely like trying to figure out what's next. And then around that time, having a child, it's like, oh, I see now. This is what life's all about. It's adding value to the lives of others. And it doesn't have to be children. I'm not trying to say everyone has to have children. You can also do it just positively impacting people in life, right? Building businesses that people enjoy or appreciate, or creating content that people appreciate. All of these things are ways to get satisfaction from that deep evolutionary impulse to add value to the lives of others.
You ever read the book, the thing is called The Second Mountain?
No.
You ever heard of it? I think it's called The Second Mountain. It talks all about that. There's like the first mountain that most people are trying to climb, which is just generally trying to create some semblance of safety within themselves. Yeah. And the way that a lot of people perceive safety, I think there's a lot of ways to become safe, but like the most prominent one would be like financial safety. Like, okay, like I can kind of like, I'm not like worried if my laptop breaks. Yeah. I'll just get another laptop. Yeah. Like it's okay. Yeah. And then for people that have had the opportunity to kind of achieve that success within their lives, there's oftentimes a deep emptiness that follows that, because you've lived your whole entire life based around the story and illusion that once I get to there, I'll finally feel different. Yeah. And if you go through that point, then it opens up to another thing where suddenly I think more things like a spiritual conversation becomes more prominent. Yeah. It's like, oh, interesting. Like maybe I need a relationship with something that I consider to be God. Oh,
Yes,
or I need to start taking care of other people. And, maybe it's like that, like there's probably something inherently health inducing about having a family and having, a core familial unit that's like, no, like you're healing me through my care for you.
Yes.
And I also tie myself into an anchor outside of just myself. I tie myself into the God or the gods. Now, suddenly I expand my consciousness into this wider net and I don't feel so alone.
That's right. In Bitcoin, we often dream about the idea of forming citadels, which are independent, self-sovereign communities that have their own energy, food, and water resources. Today, that dream is becoming a reality at the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a 705-acre regenerative agriculture community located at the Florida-Georgia line near Folkston, Georgia. The farm is known as the healthiest place on earth, and it includes orchards, organic standing gardens, regenerative animal pastures, berry fields, and much, much more. Today, the farm features 25 custom-built cabins and has plans to construct 225 more in the years ahead. The farm has its own food, energy, and water sources and is completely off-grid. So if you're looking to join a Citadel community comprised of sovereign individuals, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about membership. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on custom cabin pricing. Again, that's okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community. iCoin Technology has released a slick new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone with a high-res 3-inch touchscreen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, and no GPS. It is an air-gapped hardware wallet which uses QR codes and a camera to communicate with the Bitcoin network. It has a built-in camera which is required for air-gap operation, and it has an optional Bluetooth compatibility. It's really a brand new user interface and user experience for a Bitcoin hardware wallet. iCoin makes self-custody accessible, easy to use, and non-intimidating. It even comes with an optional custom iCoin thermal printer so you can print out the private key and its associated QR code when you're setting up the wallet. This makes setup quick and simple. Also, it is easy to restore the wallet just by reading the seed phrase QR code with the wallet camera. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like the iCoin wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. So go to iCointechnology.com/breedlove today for 30% off the purchase of this sleek new hardware wallet. Again, that's iCointechnology.com/breedlove. When you get into the family building, it's like you want to have the relationship with God and then the relationship with your wife and then the relationship with the children. I mean, that's what Christianity teaches. And I think it needs to be in that order, actually. Because the relationship with God, and look, if you're non-theological, like you could call it the relationship with nature if you want. It's the transcendental mystery that we all experience and we put different stories to, right? Like it's the word for that which is beyond words, basically, is God. You do need a relationship with that. It's the fabric of reality itself. You need to have that dialed in. Like, who are you? What is your purpose on this planet?
You don't need to, but it would behoove you to.
Well, I think to build a sound and prosperous family, you do need that relationship dialed in. Like, I don't think you can do it without it. I mean,
what does it look like to dial that relationship in?
It's an ongoing process for me, but I think a lot of it is studying the traditions of old. Like there's a reason we've been doing things the way we've been doing things for so long, oftentimes.
Yeah.
So trying to like lean on the wisdom of our ancestors, have really good rituals with your family. It's like you need to, we eat dinner together, we do this together, whatever it may be. And
rituals around connection.
Yeah, like my wife does all the cooking, but I'm usually hanging out with her in the kitchen and like we're talking about things. So we make it a point to connect frequently And obviously that bleeds over into relationship with wife. I would also, in relationship with God, for me, is like meditation, reading, prayer, like all these things you do on a regular basis are really enriching to you. And then I can show up and not be pouring from an empty cup when I'm relating with my wife, and then we're planning for a future.
What happens to a culture, society, because we all have a religion? You could just say a religion. Well, actually, like the actual etymology or original meaning, root meaning of religion, religio, it means to connect, I believe.
Yeah.
And so, maybe I a little bit disagree with the idea of religion just being the thing that you spend the most, you pay the most attention to. But let's just call that, like, we all have some form of, even if you're atheist or whatever, you still have something that you worship and something that you idolize and something that's like, no, like this is the thing. For many people, probably listen to this, they might not realize that a big part of their religion might be money. It might be, institutions and wealth and all of that. I wonder what happens to a culture when at one point in certain towns in Europe and probably a lot of places, no tower could be bigger than that of the church. Any direction, any place you're at, anytime you look up, you see the church.
Yeah.
And so there's an energy, or if you go into Muslim culture where it's like 5 times a day, no matter what, you stop whatever the frick you're doing. I don't care what the Bitcoin's doing or stock market's doing or whatever, like you stop now.
And pray.
And you pray.
Yeah.
And you get down and you bow down.
Yeah.
And you say, oh yeah, right, cool. Like reset.
Yeah.
Like, okay, God.
Yes.
I wonder what happens to a culture when the tallest building is the bank.
Yeah, it's a good point. Again, back to your connection between the physical and the mental, right? That so much of it's occurring in the body and then percolating up to the brain. Physical environments matter a lot. And so what's the saying that Churchill said, we shape our buildings and our buildings in turn shape us?
Yeah, exactly.
It is a reflection of what we're putting as the highest value in our pinnacle of values, right? That we've gone from the church as the tallest building into corporations generally, banks probably more specifically tend to be.
Or tech companies.
Tech companies.
Google.
And like we have to have these hierarchies of value. There's a weird confluence between religion, politics, and money. They're all like these belief systems that we have that we attach our identity to a greater or lesser extent. But again, for me, like the relationship with a personal God that's what diffuses my attachment of my identity to those different belief systems. It's like, because one of the things about having a good relationship with God is that you will take all knowledge in the worldly domain to be provisional. Like, I'm never going to believe that the Republican Party is the be all end all. Yeah. I'm just picking an example out of the blue. I'm not actually a Republican or Democrat or anything. I don't even vote, to be completely honest.
Would you probably be libertarian if you had to?
I'm an anarcho-capitalist. Yeah. So I was like anti-state to the core, so much to the point where I don't even vote. So, but the point is, if you have a very good relationship with God, you're not going to get psyoped into any of these actual organized religions or political parties or even monetary systems, right? You'll just see them for what they are, is they are provisional belief systems, but ultimately it's about, are you doing what's right according to your actual deeply held values and principles? Like, can you sleep at night? Can you look in the mirror? Do you have a clean conscience? Like, these are the things that ultimately matter, not is the Republican Party winning? Is my favorite shitcoin pumping? Like, that's all secondary or even tertiary.
Yeah. What's the Bible quote about a camel making it through the eye of the needle?
Easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to get into heaven.
Yeah.
That's a mysterious one. But I think it has something to do with, money is power. So the more money you have, the more power you have. And there seems to be a lot of temptation to abuse power when you have it, right? When you're in an asymmetric position over other people, it's difficult to maintain that loving Christ-like demeanor.
It just becomes, it doesn't become impossible. You just become
you
more,
get seduced
you
by
become
the
more
world.
Of yourself.
Yeah.
And so if you have a bunch of I don't know, this language might be too wanky, but like unhealed traumas, contractive patterns of old.
I love how Tim Ferriss said, having more money is like money and alcohol are similar. Basically, it's like
just,
the more money you have, it lowers your inhibitions.
Yeah.
So it's going to amplify whatever's underneath, basically.
Yeah. And so it just becomes a greater level of responsibility and accountability to like sweep up your own porch.
Yes.
And if you choose not to, the problem is, and I have the opportunity to I've worked with a lot of celebrity people and athletes and billionaires and people that are very, very affluent to the degree that there are very few people around them that would ever say anything against what they're saying or thinking. They just want to massage them because they want to stay around.
Sure.
That's a super dangerous position.
The brown nosers, I know. And it's very difficult for the person.
Because you start to almost like, you're like a satellite. You're drifting out into space.
Exactly.
And you're not living a real world anymore.
And you need, again, social connection. I love how Peterson says we outsource our sanity to the 5 people around us. It's like you need people that are going to give you honest feedback and tell you about your blind spots and tell you when you misstep. And if you don't have that, or all of a sudden you can't trust that, or people are hesitant to say that, well, then you are going to drift from your own sanity. And it also, in the world of dating, I've thought about how difficult that would be. Like to be a billionaire and be a bachelor.
It's not cool.
Like, how could you trust that any of the women that are into you are authentically into you, right? I mean, and look, I don't fault women actually for preferring a man that's more financially successful, because that's a pretty good heuristic for determining, is this guy, productive, intelligent, useful to other people? Like society is rewarding him financially, hopefully, if it's in a world where private property is being preserved, that this guy is doing something useful for other people. That's why he's made money.
Yeah.
That's a good indication for a woman to be like, oh, this guy's probably a good father material, right? I can build the nest. He's got the means, he's got the resources. She doesn't need to spend a lot of time digging into his psychology to figure out if he's the right partner for that. You can take it as a pretty good heuristic if he has financial means that he's probably a good partner for that. Now, it's not a guarantee, right? You can be a rich douchebag, you can be a rich alcoholic, whatever. But I don't think there's anything wrong with using that as criteria for mate selection.
Do you think there is a quantity? I think I already know your response, but do you think there's a quantity of wealth or money that starts to, the arc goes the other direction and it actually just becomes problematic and detrimental to your quality of your life?
You mean the other, like as in you get
so if you have like whatever the statistic is, a very scarily high percentage of Americans presently couldn't afford a surprise $450 bill or $600 bill, whatever that is.
Horrible position to be in. Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
That will affect happiness. Unless you're in some place, I mean, you could go, move to some retreat center or whatever, and you don't use money, and then suddenly it's a perfectly fine position. But in this world, really, really bad spot.
You're saying is there a point in wealth accumulation that ever gets back to that on the happiness?
Not back to that, but to get to a point where, the average is whatever, depends on the place that you're at, but call it maybe $100,000 a year or something like that. Happier. Is there a point financially where it actually just becomes more of a problem in one's life?
I mean, I would only lean on I have 2 things to lean on: the studies and then anecdotally my own life experience. The study says there's just diminishing returns after $70,000, $80,000, $100,000. It's like the 1-to-1, it's a non-linear regression. Basically, the more money, whatever. If your happiness is a 50 at $100,000, by the time you get to $500,000, it's like a 55, right?
Yeah.
You get diminishing returns on happiness as wealth goes up. I do think that there's a qualitative component here. I don't know that we can reduce it purely to the quantitative, in that what is your relationship with money ultimately, right? It's like, if your purpose is just to acquire more and more and more, at any expense, like forget my health, forget my family, forget my friends, like I just want to do anything I can.
Your software is broken.
Yeah.
There's a bug in your software.
That's going to fuck you up, right? The more you have, you're going to be competing to get more. And so there's definitely that. But if you've got a good relationship with money and you're using it as a tool to create your, imprint your imagination on the world or to pursue your dreams, then I think it's more about the relationship with money than it is the quantity of money, if that makes sense, in my opinion.
How have you felt?
Why are you asking me the questions? I'll just ask you the questions.
My nature is to ask questions. I'll ask questions.
I'm going to ask you a question next.
Come around. Yeah.
You wrote a book.
Yeah, I did.
What is the Align method?
Align method's a book I wrote like 6 years ago. The main ethos or premise of the book is that you are constructing your body and your health 100% of the time. Your body has no idea the difference between being in a gym or a yoga studio or a place that you deem to be, a space for like training or exercise. Right now, our body is constructing itself. We have fibroblasts and fibroclasts and osteoblasts and osteoclasts and all of these builders and destroyers of cells that are constructing our cells based off of the way that we conduct ourselves in daily life, including the way that you use your visual muscles, includes the way you use your respiratory muscles or your respiration in general, the way that you express yourself with body language, voice, tone, all of that. You are always tuning and training yourself. And
the way is in training.
Yeah,
is what Musashi said. That's
exactly. They make your battle stance your everyday stance. Yeah. So the Align method essentially is like a remake of Miyamoto Musashi, but in like layman terms.
Amazing.
Yeah, because I'm obviously not a samurai.
It reminds me of Theseus's ship, where they're like the ship leaves and they start replacing parts on it, and they keep replacing parts on it. And by the time they get to their destination, they replace all the parts on it, and like it's a brand new ship.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's like we're doing that all the time.
We're literally always doing that. Yeah. And the way that you, particularly posturally, we live in a culture that is very depressive in the anatomical, like Webster's definition of it. And when a person is chronically, jutting their head forward or collapsing their shoulders forward, or maybe you live in Miami and you want to be seen, if you're a guy, as being really confident and strong. So you'll puff your chest out, and then you'll go into hyperlordosis or excessive tilt forward of the pelvis, and you destabilize the lower back. Belly kind of comes forward. You're breaking the main central channel of your central nervous system, being your spine. You're throwing off the pressure dynamics in your body, and you're not able to actually truly be as strong as you were trying to convey in a temporary way to people. You're selling people a shit coin, which is your confidence.
Interesting.
And similar thing happens with a girl where she's trying to express like, look at my ass. It's available, in Miami. It's just, make sure you have a boat or something of the sort. All of that is just, it's really beautiful and sweet and lovely, the way that we are communicating to each other. And you can unpack it, and you can actually see a lot of vulnerability. Yeah. Like the most vulnerable, precious people are the people that are the most insecure. And the people that are the most insecure are the people that front the hardest. And they're the most challenging to tolerate for the most part. But you can wind it back and just see them as like precious little children that just want to be loved.
Yes. We're all grown-up children. That's for sure.
Wearing adult costumes.
It kind of reminds me of virtue signaling to some extent, that, people that try to be really loud about a certain
they just want to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
Because they don't feel that way.
Yeah. So is it an overcompensation?
Typically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Or you could be like you could be really intelligent, and you could be playing the game, and you're playing like the heel, and you're doing like a Jake Paul type scenario where you're like, okay, I want to sell some tickets. So I'm going to be loud and flashy and like a total asshole, even though I'm actually like a pretty sensitive and, introverted person. Yeah. I'm going to do this because this will sell. Yeah. So it's not like if you're just loud, you're just insecure. You could be smarter than the game.
Could be performative.
Yeah. Which is great.
Yeah.
And then the more challenge, then you're playing.
Yes.
The challenge is when you're being played by the game.
Yeah.
Which is like, I just really so deeply want to be seen because inherently I feel, unvalued.
Yeah. Wow. This gets very complicated, right? Because there's a lot of questions about what does it even mean to be your authentic self, right? Because your self is, it's just a story, really. You're telling yourself about who you are, and then you represent that story to the world, hopefully authentically. And authentically, I guess, means true to what your experience has been.
Yeah, authentic's temporal.
Yeah, but then it can also be like sort of...
You're authentic right now might be totally disauthentic in 2 weeks. Be like, oh, wow, I've totally changed. But the path to the other side is through, so as long as you're taking your best crack at not putting on a costume or putting on a mask.
Yes.
That's the original meaning of persona.
Yes.
You already know that probably. Yeah. So persona is the masks that I think it was in like Greek theater, and they would call these conical masks that would project your voice out because they don't have like mics. That would be the persona that you would wear, the mask that you would wear.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we can remove our persona,
yes,
or do the best that we can at being like, and I think that would be one of the most healing factors or actions for the planet, generally speaking, is people feeling more safe within themselves, which is a whole process. Like the process of feeling safe is so multifactorial.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you feel safe enough to be able to show your hand and risk someone not loving, caring, appreciating, accepting your authentic self?
Right.
Because that feels so much more painful than someone not affecting your persona because it's not even me.
Yes.
And then I start to be so caught up in that game that I think that I am my persona because I've never actually felt safe enough to be seen.
Yes. That's what I was going to connect. So when you've worn, because you never can take off all the mask, I don't think. Like because your whole personality or your personality is composed of these layers of personas to a certain extent, right? That you've played a certain role, or whatever it may be, brother, sister, father, mother, your job.
You could probably eat enough mushrooms or seriously.
You can have some moments of that raw child.
Or you can like sit and meditate long enough that you literally like you leave the meat suit and you become the room. And there's just a consciousness.
Yeah. The dissolution of all separateness, right?
My thing's
there it goes again.
We're not stopping the podcast for my thing
Push
swooping.
it back and then get it to drop in.
It's not dropped in again?
No, push it away from you.
Bro, we're dropped. We're locked and loaded.
No,
this is fine. This works. Dude, we're good. God dang it.
We got a
I swear to God, we're stopping the podcast for this.
No, the editor's going to take 5 seconds up.
Yeah.
I love these moments.
We're good.
These are my favorite moments. Keep the organic stuff in.
Jesus Christ.
Organic stuff stays. Keep that in too.
All good.
You got Neanderthal feet too, bro?
That stays. That stays. Dude, that was our vulnerable expression in this podcast.
No, I want to go
that
further.
Was the real shit, bro.
So the personas, like you are putting, and look, people that aren't, people are like, oh no, I don't never wear a mask. I'm always myself. It's like, I don't know. Are you? Like, we're all, putting your best foot forward, or like, being on your best behavior. You hear these terms, like we all act differently around different people to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it's like beyond, it's unconscious to some extent, and it's therefore beyond our control. But the intention, I think, to try and engage with people authentically, it's like to even talk about what we're talking about right now, right? It's a little bit meta behavioral in a way that we're talking about our behavior as we're behaving. Like that intentionality seems to be like you're tracking closer towards authenticity, even though you can never take off all the masks, right? Like you've been putting them on your whole life. And so I think the personality in a way is a composite of all those personas you've donned over time, plus maybe the personas you've interacted with from other people.
Mm-hmm. That's why flow state, which there's I never know how to say his name. It's like Mihan or something. It's got a very long, a lot of letters.
I've read his book,
in his name. I've done a bunch of interviews with Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel, who they co-wrote the book. Was it Rise of Superman? Was that the one that was about flow state? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
He wrote Flow.
Flow. Okay, that was Flow. Yeah, but they also did Rise of Superman.
Yeah.
And that, I think, defines authenticity to some degree, and is probably why flow state activities are so attractive and even addictive, because it feels really good to get out of the way of yourself, to actually find yourself.
Right. You get totally out of the mind and totally into the body and activity.
Yeah. And the more time that you can spend in that, and that's like, if you're a musician or any of that, it retunes and recalibrates the system back to something that feels more true.
Yes.
Like capital T true.
Yes.
And the more time you can spend in capital T true, which is why it feels good to have a relationship to God, whatever your definition of God. The concept of God, you're probably a little confused with the exact like language or definition, but it's more just the energy of going towards something that's, I don't know, creator,
yes,
source, whatever, call it whatever you want.
Yeah, of value to others, I would say. I mean, well, not even, it doesn't even have to be that though. Because I was thinking, like, they give the example of rock climbing in that book Flow. That's one of the most reliable ways to induce a flow state.
Sure.
I don't know if I can recall all the reasons why, but they said, I think there was 3 reasons why.
Oh yeah, right.
It's because you need really tightly coupled feedback loops. So like, as you're rock climbing, if you miss, well, there's quick feedback, right? Like, you're falling off the rock.
Yeah.
Failure has to matter. Like, there have to be consequences. If you're just rock climbing over a safety net and like it doesn't matter, it's like it's harder to get into that flow state.
Yeah.
I forgot the third one, but like those are the types of activities that make us feel really alive because we are reckoning with a challenge that's actually pushing us to our limits, right? Rather than being in this kind of, what is the state where you're putting on these masks? I guess you're just like playing pretend. Well, it's hard to pretend rock climb, basically, right? It's like,
there's also something to, and we can like wind this back to something that's more like objective, anatomical something, or we can keep, getting lost in the woods of metaphysics. But I think there's something probably to the shape of the consciousness and the shape of the body when it's taking on that flow state. It's probably a lot more, and I'll have to like unpack more of this because I'm kind of just thinking about this right now for the first time, but it's probably more of an arc type experience, and it's probably less hard angles, less squares. So when you're in flow, so like there's the research from Albert Einstein School of Medicine that they were studying what was the highest leverage activity a person could do to stave off cognitive decline. And they found partner dance to music was the best thing you could possibly do, because it kind of forces you into this, like, it's like this confluence of all of the electrical factors of stimulating and enlivening your system, particularly like the emotional parts. And so that's like, you have enough of that sensual information, sensual in the sense of just activating your senses, that it's like, whoa, like you said, if you can start to become the music, or you're playing an instrument in a band and it's like, oh, I'm just kind of like, it's like being possessed by it. I'm not even here anymore. Like I left the room a long time ago. You're probably going to be a lot less chunky, straight line, sagittal plane robot. And we are living in a world that's good for efficiency, depending upon your goal of, where you want to go. But we've kind of collectively, unconsciously or consciously agreed on going towards technological efficiency. And we're trying to, maybe not trying, just through the nature of like, we become our environments. Like the medium is the message. Have you ever heard of that book before? Yeah, exactly. So like we become our environment. Our environment's now shifting largely technological in nature, which is inherently a bit of a conflict with human biology. And now maybe we're getting closer to human biology as we're getting into like AGI and all that stuff.
For sure.
Quantum computing. It's we might be tapping like back. We're almost like reinserting human biology in a way back into the system, but going through industrial age and all these different time frames where it's much more linear, sagittal, right angles. You don't see any of that in human biology or expression. Flow state temporarily takes you out of that physically, and like a kind of a metaphysical, just stony pipe thought is, I wonder if there's some type of shape to consciousness. And when you're in more of that biological shape of arcs over corners, it just feels good.
I was going to say, that
like I feel better.
Well, and that's why, like, if you need a reset, you go camping for 3 days, right? Like by day 3, you're just totally,
you become absorbed by nature.
Different. Yeah. And it's, if consciousness has a shape, it's probably fractal, right? Just like the geometry of nature tends to be, but man-made structures aren't so much fractal. And so, and that's probably why we even call it a flow state, because it is, you conform yourself to nature, right? Like if you're a surfer on that wave, there's one sweet spot to find.
I became the wave.
Yes, you have to actually get on the wave in a way the only place the wave will allow you to be, basically, right, to ride it properly. It reminds me that there's so many quotes coming to mind. One that I cite a lot is that nature to be commanded must be obeyed. So it's like, you're not conquering the wave. You're not like mastering it or telling it. It's like, no, you're working with it and you're obeying its laws. And that's where you find that line that allows you to ride it, right? So you're commanding it by obeying it.
Yeah.
Basically.
That's why the humblest people are people that are exposed to like big nature or big dangerous people.
Right.
Like the best martial artists and the biggest wave surfers, like Laird Hamilton's like one of the kindest, sweetest human beings you could possibly ever connect with, in my opinion. Then Gabby is much more, his wife, Gabby Reese, is much more like direct and focus. And it's very interesting that their dynamic, which I think they're both just like exceptional, beautiful human beings. But Laird's this big, gnarly, tan, jacked, Oahu surfer guy riding giants. And he's just the sweetest little, like, whatever, teddy bear type person. And he has the potential to kill. Yes. And the potential to save and the potential to protect.
Right.
But it's through that humbling experience of being exposed to like big nature where you're like, it like recalibrates you in a really important way. And if you're a person playing a small game, but you're like a big captain in a small game, then you have more of this like unconscious incompetence, which is kind of the most gross to be around.
Yeah, for sure. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. I also have noticed that around a lot of athletes, specifically fighters, they're just so chill.
They're chill.
They're just calm as a cucumber because they know the chaos of fighting.
They just had their ass kicked a lot.
Yeah, and they've had their ass kicked a lot. And it's like, it's very humbling.
Yeah.
Whereas if you haven't exposed yourself to a lot of that, then it's easy to kind of be.
Or if you have a bad trip, like you get done with a bad trip, you're like, like I'm not nearly as confident as I used to be. Like I need a couple of weeks to resort this out.
Yeah, which that's why I think humility is not this like position of weakness. It's not that you were talking earlier about the depressed guy that's, and that whole orientation is like closer to death, right? That's probably why we don't like it. It's like, this guy's like sitting there and he's static.
It's a disassociation.
He's not moving. He's not. We're goal-oriented creatures, right? So if someone is moving forward, and there's shoulders back, chest up, confident, you're much more likely to want to follow that person that's alive and doing something versus the person that's not doing it.
Yeah.
And so the other quote that came to mind, this is a great one too, that we have. I think it's E.O. Wilson. The problem with the world, or the problem with the human condition, I think he said, is that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technologies. Mm-hmm. So we have all these different layers in us competing with one another. And push it away and then drop it down. How does it keep coming out for you so much?
I don't know.
It's just coming out.
We're good now. People listening, we got a little technical difficulty with our arm situation with the mic. It's all good. It's a part of the authenticity of the human experience.
This is how the sausage is made.
Unique to this episode
episode only.
Yes, one and done. Okay, all right. What do you mean when you say aligned? Like, obviously, you talked about physical alignment, but you also talked about how the physical is integrated with the somatic. Is that the right term? The mental?
Somatic just means of the body.
Oh, of the body. Sorry. So the somatic is integrated with the mental.
Yeah, and emotional.
How does proper physical or somatic alignment relate to emotional, mental, spiritual alignment?
That's a good, like, big question that probably, I think I'd probably answer in a different way. Like, you know, if you ask me again tomorrow or the next day or whatever, it'd probably be like a little bit of a different response. But the connection between that, I mean, there's more of like a scientific lens that you can look at it from. So there's a fancy term called embodied cognition, which is like one kind of other angle or position. And we can kind of chip at different lenses or avenues in the question. But embodied cognition is kind of an interesting concept where we change our experience, our felt state, based off of our embodied experience. And one of the things that would be involved in that would be like if a person is, there's been research where people are smiling and they're forced to smile because they put a pencil between their teeth and they just like force a smile. And then they'll end up perceiving things as a little bit more humorous and a little bit more happy. If you put a eraser in your eyebrow, so you create a resting bitch face, you form yourself into finding things a little bit more irritating. There's an author called Paul Ekman, who I've actually had on my podcast as well. I think he's like one of the most cited, I don't even know what he's like a anthropologist, I think would probably be his thing, but he went to Papua New Guinea, among other places, and he went against the ideas of, if I remember correctly, of Darwin, where the belief was that facial expressions were something that were culturally learned, but your facial expressions anywhere in the world, they're all the same damn thing.
Oh, smiling.
And so when you're smiling, when you're frowning, when you're crying, all that stuff, it's an expression sending information out. And it's also tied back into the same nerves and the same physiology and hormones and all of that stuff that would work both bottom up and top down. So it's like William James, Sir William James, who's I think they call him like the father of modern medicine, psychology. He innovated a lot of those thoughts, and I think it was like the late 1800s, where his ideas, one of the things I actually reference in my book, The Aligned Method, is we move ourselves into sensation or into emotion as opposed to emoting ourselves into movement. So his idea is like, if you see a bear, you don't just sit there and experience fear inside your brain unless you shut down, in which case that's an expression of shutting down. Right. But generally you're going to clench your fists or you're going to clench your jaw, or you're going to, you're going to start to, like, you literally will move blood into the appendages in order to get yourself out of there. And so it's this physical expression of this internal emotional state. And so to separate them, I think, is almost impossible. Yeah. And so that's kind of the thing, like the concept, it's almost like it's like the question is inherently broken.
There's no separation between mind
it's
and
like
body.
what's exactly. Yeah. So it's like, what is the separation between the mind and the body? It's like
none.
That's not the right question. It's like it just shouldn't even exist.
I've heard
just
too,
like
there's experiments done where like people holding a warm mug of water.
Same thing. You'll see people as being more like warm and open.
Warm and friendly. Yeah.
They did the specific thing where they were like, I think they were reading a story as they were holding iced tea and a warm mug, and they found the people that would perceive the story as being more warm or open, or like the character in the story. I mean, if they're holding something icy, they see it as being more like cold, true.
Yes. So there's a strange metaphorical component too, right? Where it's not just if you fake smile, then you feel happier. There's also like the feeling of kinetic warmth somehow translates into interpersonal warmth.
Which is why cultures are very different in warmer places than cooler places. So if you go to Italy and you go to like the south of Italy and you go to the, what's the
Amalfi Coast?
Yeah, it's a blue zone. What's the island that's a blue zone down in southern Italy?
Ooh, that I don't know.
Come on, what is it called? I was just talking to a girl from there yesterday. Was it? No, it's not that. Anyways, people know. But people in southern Italy, I haven't been to southern Italy actually. I've only, the furthest south I was like a little bit down from Rome. But the stories I get from southern Italy is like, oh bro, like you'd love southern Italy. Everyone's nice, it's warm, it's more laid back. Like the culture is totally different than Milan.
Yeah.
And as you go up north, it gets colder. Harder, people start to go inside more. They're putting on big jackets. They're
more separation.
But that creates something else. They're probably maybe a little bit more intellectual. They're probably a little bit more shrewd and sharp, and they probably are more efficient. They get things done. It's more masculine in nature. It's a little bit more angular and hard and directive of like, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
Go down south, suddenly atoms start to expand, and we are a bunch of atoms and molecules and hormones and gases and all that stuff. We expand and we like loosen up a little bit. And we show up a little bit late. And we're a little bit more inconsistent.
We're on
and
island
we're a little
time.
bit, it's like I'm a little bit more suddenly like down here in the tropics, we're a little bit more like a gas. And then as we go up north, the gas slows down and we get a little bit more like a solid.
Right.
It's all good.
So we could solve all the world's problems by relocating everyone to the equator.
Well, people will be more chill.
Yeah.
So if you're more uptight and more like David Data in his book, Becoming
The Way of the Superior Man?
Way of the Superior Man, yeah. That's what he says. He says like tropical environments are more feminine in nature and masculine environments are more, like New York City or places like that, more hard, dense, fast, loud. That would be more like a quote, like masculine type place. And so we'll draw out those qualities where you'll start, dressing a little bit tighter, you start paying attention to like angles and things and get yourself some shoulder pads, and you like, I'm the kind of guy that gets shit done. I'm from New York.
Fuck yeah.
Like you can trust me. You can't trust those California mofos.
It's so funny you said shoulder pads because one of my best friends just moved to New York City and we used to call him shoulder pads.
Nice.
He had this anyways,
nice.
He's going to do great. He's doing great in New York City.
So you can look at if you extend out the concept of like fitness and exercise, you could look at fitness and exercise as also being your chosen geographical location. So if there's certain ways that you want to be or feel, then choose a geographical location, because that's like a la Bruce Lipton, the biology of belief and epigenetics and all that. If you want to change the cell in a petri dish, you change the substrate that the cell resides within. You don't do anything to the cell itself. And so if you want to augment your self, like your environment's going to be one of the biggest things.
The medium is the message.
The medium is the message. Yeah, exactly.
And so culturally you're plugging yourself into different cultures and getting different downloads. You're imitating people differently around you, but also the environment's influencing you. I think it all grounds out in that physics concept of entrainment, or like the vibrational pattern of one system. When you put it near another system, they start to harmonize. So like, we've all seen the tuning fork. You hit the tuning fork and if they're at the right frequency, they start to resonate together.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Women and their menstrual cycles start to harmonize. You got to think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration to kind of get the real picture. Yeah. But the climate perspective on human social organization is fascinating.
Yeah, you're more likely to have sex. You're more likely to get into fights. Summer times where you fuck and you fight.
Yeah.
Once it gets cold, you kind of go inside a little more. You're probably still fucking, but
probably drinking. Are they drinking a lot more in colder climates?
Way more trouble, way more danger.
Yeah.
Tropical environments, it starts to. You get like you excite the particles.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's maybe something to be said too that because there's more economic scarcity in colder climates, that it actually forces people to become more innovative and seafaring and plundering and all these, like the Vikings and the English Navy.
Yeah, if you want to write a book, probably go to some cabin someplace in like a cold rainy location.
You got no other
and
option.
you're just going to be absorbed into the book. You'd like become the writing.
Yeah.
Probably not wise to go to like Miami or
That's why
something.
It's been so hard to write my book.
I bet.
I've been doing
It's
it in
the
Miami.
distractions of all the things.
I have to take my ass to Greenland, I guess.
Yeah.
What is it? Because I'm deeply fascinated in this too. And so this is where we probably have some overlap. The intersection between ancient wisdom and modernity broadly, but modern science specifically. I found like the most intellectual alpha available in the world today is like either reading really old books or reading really like abstract, cutting edge scientific research papers.
Yeah. There's like I don't know, the adage, I guess you could call it, where it's old people can teach you the things that don't change and new people can teach you about the things that do. Both old perspectives and new perspectives are great. So you can get into biohacking and technology and all the, all the different things. And, so I do training and, I've done rehab for certain athletes and things of the sort where it's like, okay, we need your tissue to heal as fast as humanly and technologically possible because we need to get you, the goal is to get you back into the season in like this impossible rate.
Yeah.
And so in those situations, there's a time that you can lean into technology in the form of all the different possibilities. You can use frequencies where essentially, if you're using something like PEMF, like pulsed electromagnetic frequencies, or RF radio frequencies, or E-stim, or hyperbaric oxygen chamber, or any of these different things using peptides, what you're doing in that is you're just capturing some subset of nature, some frequency that like healing frequency that you get within nature, and you are concentrating that and reinterpreting that into something that we can like put into a machine and focalize directly on this one spot.
Gotcha.
And so we can kind of grab nature, concentrate it, and take its potential, healing abilities and use that in a more myopic way for the body, which is super cool. And the only way that has any relevance is if you're tied into the things that don't change. Like you're a human first for millions and millions of years, depending upon your belief systems. Maybe it's all simulation, in which case, whatever. But within the simulation, evolution is probably like the most common agreement.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so within that, you come from the earth, you come from the ground, you come from sunlight, you're exposed to sun, you're connected to circadian rhythms. One of the biggest things that's happened likely that's been degenerative to human health is the introduction of the light bulb, particularly an alternating current light bulb instead of an incandescent bulb that has a little bit more of like a consistent
the flicker.
Yeah, it's the flicker part that becomes problematic. It's more like efficient.
Yeah.
If you get an incandescent bulb, it gets all hot and all that's like a fire risk. You can't even buy them in California, I don't think.
Yeah, I think they've been illegalized, and I think they're coming back now because the science is.
If you want to be healthy, I think you really got to stick to the old stuff.
Yeah.
Stay away from smart cities. Stay away from the things like the direction of technology, good for certain aspects of creating efficiency in your life. If you can leverage technology or, Bitcoin or whatever, and suddenly I'm able to take what I had and leverage that and multiply that by a lot. So suddenly I have access to greater resources because of tech. Love that. Just make sure you stay as organic as possible in like your actual human biological suit.
Yeah.
Because you don't like the human suit doesn't do that well with tech.
Yeah.
Intuitively, and there's significant research around that. So having, I think, the radiation of your phone sitting up against your testicles throughout the day is probably like just not wise.
Terrible. Yeah.
And so certain things like that, it's like you feel naturally better when you walk along the beach in comparison when you're sitting in a high rise or when you're getting out of an airplane.
Yeah.
So we're these bioelectrical creatures that do really well with the acoustics of nature.
Yeah.
And the more time you can spend in nature, just like you said, you go camping for 3 days, you don't even realize that you needed to go camping for 3 days because you're so disconnected from that sensation. Suddenly you do that and you're like, oh, I didn't realize this is like, it's almost like Stockholm syndrome. Most people are experiencing some version of Stockholm syndrome to modern culture. And you feel like you need all of these things that are in fact making you sick.
Yes.
And if they weren't making us sick collectively, we wouldn't see ourselves exposed to all of the medicine and all of the biohacks and all of the things, but statistically we're getting lonelier and sicker and fatter and more diabetic.
And the answer is staring us in the face, right? Just go back to our roots.
Gotta freaking go outside.
Yeah. Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware's mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few strokes of the keyboard. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your miner's energy bill for the first week of each of your mining rigs when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. OnRamp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-sig vault guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which that have unilateral control over your assets. More than just security, OnRamp simplifies inheritance and estate planning, ensuring your Bitcoin wealth moves seamlessly to your loved ones without the risk and complexities of self-custody. Easily designate beneficiaries right in the OnRamp dashboard, eliminating the need for unreliable treasure maps or other complex key-sharing schemes. You can also avoid the probate process and ensure your heirs receive their Bitcoin securely with legal title transfers designed to keep your wealth intact for generations. As Bitcoin continues to appreciate, OnRamp helps you seamlessly access financial services, from inheritance and insurance to trading, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security. And importantly, the onboarding process is fast and frictionless. I set up my own OnRamp account, and it was far easier than dealing with hardware wallets or traditional self-custody setups. The team walked me through everything step by step, making sure I had a secure, reliant setup for my Bitcoin wealth. Secure your generational wealth with confidence. Schedule a consultation with the OnRamp team today at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. I recall, this was years ago, but I went to a former business partner's ranch in northern Nevada, and they didn't have any Wi-Fi or cell phone signal up there.
Feels different. Feels quiet.
Well, we spent 5 days there, and I was like, day one, I was like having this, just tweaking out about my phone. And I was like, oh, I need to check my phone.
You're like
check
a
my
crackhead.
phone. And then like day 2, you're like kind of depressed because you don't have it. And then day 3, you're like,
This is me.
I forgot that like you don't need a phone. You can just be alive in nature. Like we're riding horses and like really integrated in nature.
Yeah.
And dude, yeah, I didn't realize how much of a detox from the digital devices is necessary.
Yeah.
And I'm ashamed to say I haven't really done much digital detoxing since. That was 10 or 15 years ago.
I could use one for sure.
Yeah.
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 I think all of us, for the most part, maybe not all of us, but most of us.
Yeah. I need to organize that into the retreats. But yeah, it's difficult too, especially once you start working online. Like, well, fuck, like hard to put your phone down for 5 days, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is excuses. It's like your addiction that's now being justified. Like I think a lot of it is kind of, there's like baked in addictive patterns and behaviors, but it's like, well, and this is justified because I need to, you know, I got to make money or whatever. I think that probably for some people, they could probably be a lot more efficient with their time usage with tech. Probably be a way for some people, maybe not for every person. But there's probably a little bit of like there's an addictive nature to what happens when you're looking at blue lights in general.
For sure.
And so you're getting this release of neurochemistry that's it's like you're upregulating a lot of systems, and then on the other side of that is kind of a drop below baseline.
Yeah.
So the dopamine goes up, and then it comes down with that. So when you're looking at your phone in the middle of the night, you're kind of getting this like woo, you're going on like this roller coaster ride. And then you come down below baseline, and it's almost like you need it back, and that's a part of what you experienced.
It's addiction.
Yeah. And so there's actually, I don't remember what the name of the computer is called.
Daylight computer.
Yeah, I was gonna say daylight computer is an interesting thing where I have one at my place. They take away the blue light from your computer, and it's really interesting how much less stimulating and exciting it is to look at your computer when you're not getting all of those. It almost feels like junk food, food blue light.
For sure. My friends got me on keeping my phone on black and white mode. Yeah.
Or you can do red. Like if I double click or triple click the side button on my phone, I'll put it into to red.
It's an instantaneous, for me, noticeable drop in the addictiveness.
Boring. Yeah, it's not nearly as sexy.
Yeah, it's way better.
It's like a girl without a BBL in Miami.
Oh, shit. Oh, he's going to get canceled for that one.
BBLs are interesting. They're like nowhere else other than Colombia, maybe.
Yeah,
I've never been in a BBL place.
I don't know that I have the trained eye to distinguish. I mean, some of them you can tell.
Come on, bro.
Well, some you can tell, but are all nice asses now BBLs in Miami?
No, for sure not.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of it's just Latin ass.
Yeah. See, this is why I stay home all the time. Because I'm a married man. Stay right here.
Yeah.
Don't get distracted.
Yeah, I live in like the heart of Babylon.
Yeah.
In South Beach.
You for sure do. Speaking of the heart of Babylon, like what are your preferred ancient philosophical traditions? Like do you get into Stoicism specifically, or like are there certain schools of thought that you pay attention to? You mentioned Musashi earlier.
Yeah, not really. There's not like anything. I just generally appreciate like something that that's I think is I've witnessed in myself that I wonder if you've witnessed in yourself. Like I grew up very Christian. Mm-hmm. So I was doing like Bible study and, like get with my friends, and we were like actually like taking notes in the Bible and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then I got into, I guess, thinking for myself around like age 16 or so, which was, through kind of coaxed along with like psychedelics and smoking weed and, whatever, and just like getting into trouble and whatnot. And kind of came to a place of like, oh my God, I think I've been lied to for most of my life about all this, and the concept of heaven and hell and the degree of literalness that I was taking, all of that I think was like, it felt really problematic and troubling for me to be like hanging out with my friend. We're smoking a blunt in his green Subaru Outback. We're like 17 years old, and we're having as deep of conversations as we could as like two stoned 17-year-olds. And he asked me like, so do you believe that I'm gonna eternally burn in hell? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh wait, I don't think I believe that. And so that, I think, from there I went down another direction of being like very, debating and contrarian towards anything that was religion or anything that like smelled like religion or
rational
dogma.
Atheism.
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now I think I'm coming to another place where I'm like, oh wait, there's a lot of really important values within those books that somehow sustain themselves for thousands and thousands of years.
Yes.
And are, like entire cultures have been governed by largely for millennia. So there's probably something to that. And it was probably a little bit like naive of me in a way to be like, I'm 19 years old, I smoked a lot of weed, and like, this is a bunch of bullshit.
Of course. Yeah, that's cool. I'm actually glad to hear you describe that, because I have kind of a similar journey of just thinking it was fairy tales for grownups when you're a teenager.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all bullshit.
But for some grownups, it is, I think.
And it can be.
I think for, like, there's some times where to degree, and who am I? I'm just, I don't really know what's going on.
I think our opinions on religion, theology get colored by the people we see, like having their own relationship with it. So if they are treating it like a fairy tale for grown-ups.
Dude, the people what you see like going down to the beach, and the people that are like, preaching and have the Bibles and they set up their little stand, they're typically, they don't they're not like the best spokesperson.
Sure.
Like they don't seem that cool.
Yeah.
You know, like it's nice. There's something nice, but then you have to like watch out for the person that's too cool because you know they might be like what is that? The wolf wearing sheep clothes.
Yes, exactly.
So I think there's an in between space.
Yes,
where there's
and so I like you went into this kind of rational atheist pathway, and then getting into yoga and meditation early 20s like took me back on the spiritual path.
Yeah,
and then. Really it's funny getting into Bitcoin and like all the philosophical rabbit holes that takes you down. When I came to the point of understanding that Neoplatonic philosophy, which had established this idea of the good or the one and preceded Christianity's actually picked up on that philosophy and imported that into Christianity as God. So God isn't a sky dad.
Yeah, right.
It's not a guy in the sky. It's like this rigorously deduced philosophical concept about this principle of unity, right? We were talking earlier about the illusion of separateness.
Yeah, right.
That's basically what it's saying is nothing is separate. Everything is interconnected. Yeah. What you do affects everything and what everyone does affects everything. And so you have to take very serious responsibility for your actions, for your thoughts, for your character, for your legacy. And like, that's a deep, deep thing, right? So that becomes religious. Mm-hmm. And so of course we put a story around it so that many people can understand it. So, you know, when you're 19 and you're reading that, you're probably just absorbing it at a certain level. But the fact that it can be reinterpreted throughout your life at multiple levels is what indicates to me how much of a classic text it really is. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I've gotten this full circle. It's like, oh, grew up going to church and you're like, oh yeah, better, you know, believe what everyone believes tells me to believe. And then you kind of rebel, almost like the hero's journey. You go out into the unknown, and then you reestablish a relationship with spirituality, and then you come back and start to see the value, the philosophical value, the behavioral value of these wisdom traditions.
There's also, have you ever heard of the book Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes by Daniel Everett?
No.
He went and studied this tribe in the Amazon and found that they were the happiest tribe based off of the percentage of time that they spent smiling each day.
Okay.
So they like, you know, tallied up how many smiles they do. Mm-hmm. It was like more than everybody else, essentially.
Yeah.
And they had a very specific type of culture, very different than most other cultures. And, you know, they didn't have specific numbers like 1 through 1,000 or whatever. They had like 1 and more than 1, you know, a bunch of them. And they didn't have something, there's a bunch of things that stood out, but it's something that was really interesting that I like reflect on a lot. Cause sometimes I'm like troubled by the concept of time and like history and the idea of like something that happened, you know, 1,000 years ago. And we have these really concrete stories of what happened 1,000 years ago. It's like, what does that even mean exactly? And if you keep on stretching that in and out, it's like, what is yesterday? Holy shit.
Yeah.
But
how do you verify those stories?
How do you verify?
Yeah.
Yeah. And within this tribe, I think they were called Tarahumara is the Black Canyon runner guys. I forget what they're called, but Dan Everett, Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes, or there might be snakes. But they found, one of the things within, and Everett had to like learn all their language as a whole thing. He actually came in as a Christian missionary was his original thing. And then eventually he got converted by the tribe. And they're like, wow, like you guys are actually living a way better life. Because when he would approach them about the concept of Jesus Christ and, you know, all these different things, they don't have a concept or conceptualization of anything outside of what they've actually experienced in this lifetime. And so if you tell me about Abe Lincoln or Jesus Christ or whatever, they want you to actually be like, oh, like, you know, has he got a firm handshake? Like what was your experience with the guy? You're like, no, this is old. This is thousands of years back. Like this is like stories that I've read in a book that's I consider to be true. It's true to me.
Yeah.
And they, in that culture, they're like, if it's not here within my experience right now, it just doesn't exist, which in some ways is almost like a hyper focus on, you know, being in the now in a way. It's like, if it's not right here, right now, it just is not.
Right.
But it's hard to do that in a technological, industrialized culture that we live in now, where you're looking at, what's my Apple stock doing? What's my Tesla stock doing? What's the Bitcoin doing? What's happening in China? What's happening in all these places? Like we're kind of abstracted or like fractaled for good or bad into the rest of the world outside of just like, how's my, you know, dog doing? What's happening here in my house?
You get immersed in all of the symbol systems, right? And it sounds like they're pretty divorced from the symbol systems.
Yeah,
Like
right,
just
exactly.
what's here and
It's
now
just
in
this.
body.
This is it.
And there's trade-offs, right? So obviously,
And they smile a lot.
they smile a lot because they
because this is it.
How could you have any anxiety about the future or regret from the past when you've sort of you've dispensed with both of them in a
it's
way,
not
right?
there.
It's like
It's
it's
not a
here
thing.
and now.
This is it. This is what we
Well,
got.
and that's the whole point of like, you know, meditation is like to get out of the future and the past and like get into the here and now. And you know, that makes you very happy, obviously, when you meditate properly.
Mm-hmm.
But the trade-off there
It also changes the production of gray matter in your brain through doing things like taking a pause in meditation.
Right.
So you'll start to reduce the gray matter in and around the amygdala, which is, you know, commonly known as like the fear center of the brain.
Yeah.
And you'll increase gray matter of the hippocampus,
Right.
and probably other places as
So
well.
these people are moving meditation, basically, right? If they're
Yeah,
never
exactly.
thinking
Which
about
if you
the
ever do Vipassana meditation,
Yeah.
that's like you have to go through a couple 10-day sets before eventually you can graduate to the point where you can do a moving Vipassana where you walk around and learn like walking, moving meditation.
Yeah.
But the prereq for that is first you need to like really unwind a lot of stuff
Yeah.
and figure out how to just sit there and be with yourself,
Yeah.
strengthen that muscle to the degree that eventually you can take that into, you know, ambulating through the world, like walking and connecting and all that stuff. And then you can start to get that. It's kind of like something I noticed with like, it's like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Was that like the Matthew proverb, Matthew principle? I think it's a Matthew principle.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Anyways, it doesn't matter.
The Matthew principle is like from those who have nothing, all will be taken. To those who have everything, more will be given.
Paraphrase.
Like that.
Yeah. It's a similar thing with exercise or fitness. You know, like you go to Miami, BBLs. You know, a lot of pelvic thrust happening. You're on the machine. You're doing a lot of that. Doing a lot of lunges, a lot of squats, and the person that develops their hip structure, they develop enough, you know, strength in that joint complex. It becomes more exciting to be doing hip movements.
Sure.
You know, so you see a lot of people that's like, oh my God, it's like the people that are the most yoked in whatever way, they just so happen to work out the most and they develop momentum in that and they just keep on going.
Right.
You know, and so it's a similar thing that I think can happen if you can bring yourself into more presence.
Yeah.
Like to do that in a highly distracted world where the most valuable commodity is actually your presence and your consciousness and your attention. Mm-hmm. So you're in this like it's like warfare for your attention.
Tension between two worlds. Right. Yeah. And that sounds amazing. Like to be the most smiling society in the world, like that sounds like a great accomplishment. But the trade-off, I would imagine, is like they're not actually accumulating knowledge over time. So I assume they're living in pretty primitive conditions.
Yeah.
Right. So standard of living would be standard of living as we define it. But honestly,
it's probably perfect. The standard of living is probably perfect.
No, I would say it's diminished though. Do they have refrigerators? Do they have medicine?
They don't
Do they
need
have
it.
transportation? Like, well, maybe they don't need it, but it seems to me like the world prefers to have more options, more conveniences.
To their own detriment.
To extend lifespans.
Why?
I mean,
if you're addicted to pharmaceutical drugs in order to like get yourself through the day, or
you
addicted
don't
to
have
stimulants,
to be though.
Not everybody, but I'm only looking at the system as a broader system, and I'm also not like have no interest or inclination to romanticize, you know, the past or you know the
I just think there's
whatever.
a lot of danger if we just zig or zag only, right? It's like
For sure.
I want to take what we've done in modernity, like the good things from that, and then take lessons from ancient tribes like that and try to blend that into what the future I'd like to see.
100% agree. Yeah.
One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably get it. You get that Bitcoin upends everything that state-sponsored schools teach us about money. For those who get the importance of Bitcoin, it is important that we have a smart way to buy and hold Bitcoin. My friends at Coinbits, the oldest Bitcoin-only exchange in the United States, have pioneered the concept of roundups, which converts your spare change into Bitcoin. Simply connect your credit or debit cards, and your usual purchases are rounded up to the nearest dollar, letting you stack sats on every purchase without even thinking about it. Coinbits also provides a terrific self-custody experience. Connect a hardware wallet for automatic withdrawals into cold storage to minimize your risk and stay sovereign over your Bitcoin. My favorite Coinbits feature is Coinbits Plus, which gives you the best exchange rate on Bitcoin. It even gives you real-time feedback on how well you are doing on your savings plan. With Coinbits Plus, power users can save more money to buy even more Bitcoin. All that, plus peer-to-peer cash and Bitcoin payments, target orders, price alerts, and more means Coinbits can help you do almost anything you need to do with Bitcoin. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove to sign up today. Again, that is Coinbits, BITS.app/breedlove.
And that's like, I did a podcast with Robert Sapolsky recently as well. The guy that wrote Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And are you familiar with him at all? He's, oh man, he's good. He's got like a big wily beard and, you know, whatever. Very interesting guy. But he lived with baboons in Tanzania for over 30 summers. And in the world, I know you know of his work.
I wonder what that'll do to you medically.
He's very special. Yeah,
he's got to be a savage, right?
He's a very interesting person. You've heard of this, the research where there was the alpha baboons ended up getting into a dumpster behind a restaurant because the alphas would always get the meat first. So there's a restaurant. I think this is probably in Tanzania, but it was Robert Sapolsky. I think it was actually doing the research. And they would go and they would get the meat. Alphas would always get it first. And then there was like a bad batch of meat and all the alphas got salmonella or something, some kind of, you know, whatever, bacterial problem. And all the alphas died off. And then suddenly it completely changed the culture into being more kind and nurturing and sweet was cool.
Wow.
Because all the assholes died. Oh my God. Have you ever heard that before?
I think I've heard of this.
I feel like you've heard this before because you're like, you hear a lot of things. Anyways, that was Robert Sapolsky. Yeah. Oh crap. What was I going to say? It's gone. Whatever. That's interesting enough. Yeah. There was a reason I was bringing up Sapolsky. It'll come back to me in a second.
Yeah, I have heard of that at a distance. I don't know what that means. So, like for humans, like does that mean we're supposed to go around and kill all the high testosterone guys?
There was a whole reason that I was mentioning Sapolsky, and now it just disappeared. It's okay. It's in the past.
We were talking about blending like modern accomplishments with these ancient accomplishments. Like we have certain.
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah. So while he was out there in Tanzania, that was one of the questions that I asked him on the podcast was like, what can the ancestral, societies that you were living with learn from you, and what can you learn from them? And is there one side that could be teaching more, or is it kind of pretty much down the middle? And that was like his response was pretty much what you'd think. Like they kind of have a lot more, their fundamentals are kind of more sound in some ways, where they're like connecting to family and nature, and they're living in cycles of the sun and the moon, and they're just like their relationship to nature is very strong.
Yes.
And then the modern person who's kind of like an alien in a way, like it's almost like they're coming on a spaceship
for sure
from the future, 1,000 years in the future, and they're like, here I have penicillin, and I have these different types of medicines and things that it can actually be super supportive, where you might have actually died or lost your child in pregnancy, but because I have these gifts from the future, I can bestow them upon you. So I think it's definitely both, for sure. But I think you really need both. And if you get too lost in the sauce of modernity and tech, and I think I would be very worried about moving into a high rise inside of a smart city,
For sure.
and driving a smart car, and being kind of just like, oh my God. And I just, and I take the elevator instead of using my legs, and I take the escalator instead of using my legs. And eventually we'll just be able to kind of lay my body in a bed, and my body will just get moved around from place to place and fed, and I'll have a catheter, and I'll have like a whole digital experience, and I'll wear goggles, and that's obviously no one would actually like that, but we're like, as we're moving closer into that place where I can, with my phone, I can order food, and I can make money, and I can do all the different things, and I can just sit here inside my domesticated space, and I can get all of the resources to circulate through me. And then I kind of slowly become,
atrophied.
I don't feel good.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't feel good anymore.
No,
I really want to chop wood and like get a fish and actually, have sex with a person.
Yeah. Hopefully a woman, right?
Whatever.
So,
2024, baby.
25. This whole thing about, this is where I think Bitcoin is a life philosophy.
Oh shit, it's not 2024 anymore.
It's 25.
What is time?
What is time? Time since Jesus, baby. This is where I think the Bitcoin life philosophy, for me, I'm trying to walk that middle path where it's like I'm using technology to liberate me to not be on my computer all day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm using Bitcoin, education about Bitcoin, building businesses online to allow me to get the most juice for the squeeze as I'm working. Right?
We use it as a lever.
I'm using it as a labor amplifier, exactly. But then what do I do with all that newfound time and freedom? Is like I try to biohack, be in nature, take care of myself. More of the ancient wisdom stuff, meditation. And so, that is the challenge of our age, basically, right? Is we're in, I don't know what it is. It's social media, digital communication, peer-to-peer communication, like all this ancient wisdom is kind of bubbling up to the surface again. And we're also kind of learning that, oh, wait, these tools that have liberated us and connected us in so many different ways can also enslave us or harm us and all these other things. We have to tilt the arc of human history kind of back towards traditional roots to some extent.
It's just going to be like cycles in the the stock market or any of that. Things go up into complexity. It gets overly complex. It seems really amazing. Oh my God, it's shiny and fancy and new. And then it all falls apart and goes back to the earth.
Yes.
And then we rebuild again. And this is evolution, and this is markets, and this is health, and this is this is just the way it goes. And so there will be a reinsurgence, which I think it's happening right now, where God becomes kind of sexy. And the concept of spirit is something you can say and not be like, you are a complete asshole. I can't believe you just said spirit on a podcast. But a lot of people are like, oh, like finally someone's talking about spirit. I knew there was something rattling around in here for a long time. But that's something, excessive scientism and excessive dualism and all of that starts to, I think, strip away some of the nature of people. And I predict there will probably, I think it's happening right now, but I think like a new reinsurgence now that we're thinking that, oh my God, technology's taking over. Now it's exponentially hockey stick. We're just gonna become, bionic everything. I think there'll probably be another one where people are like, oh my God, I just want to like sing in a choir. I want to take a walk in a real park. I want to touch a woman. And I want to like have, I just want
the human experience,
the IRL. That's all I care. I want to get my phone and my goggles off my face. Like no more.
No. And I think that's my hypothesis is that the technology, well, let's just go with AI specifically. It's going to automate or upend a lot of these white collar jobs, right? Accountants, consultants, investment bank, even the creative class doesn't have to just be white collar.
Plumbers and electricians are the next millionaires of the world.
That's what I was going to say. Is like
if you were a real man, or a woman,
or a masseuse,
or
right? Like anything that involves that human to human connection,
or a talk therapist, or something that's like you have a problem, I have a solution in the physical plane. And you'd be like, damn, like you are just, it's like charge whatever you want. Because everybody left those jobs because they weren't sexy 20 years ago. Now you need to call a plumber. And I mentioned this in the last podcast. I just called a plumber for my place in Bend, Oregon. And I'm not there. And I'm essentially like a hostage to whatever he says. And he's like, yep, it's ended up being like $2,500 for him to plumb my thing. And I'm like, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
You gotta get another,
I got no
gotta get
choice,
another
man.
quote or property manager. Yeah.
And I'm talking to him. It's like, bro, you don't understand. I got to go in. Like, I'm going to get like shit on me. I got to put on like a suit so I don't get shit on me. So I got to charge an extra $500. And it's just like, you can charge whatever you want because I don't know how to do any of that. So you can pick your price.
Captain Audience Premium.
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't say that on a podcast, man.
Yeah, right.
All your service providers are going to fleece you now.
It's true though. I think being a man, and I think like that's a job that feels inherently like traditionally masculine.
Yeah.
I think there is and will be a reinsurgence of women being attracted to like a traditional man.
Yeah.
And just culturally, it's like, whoa, like something broke in your house and you like could fix it.
Yeah.
Like with your mind and your body.
Yeah.
Like, no.
This is one domain where I feel quite emasculated. Like I'm not so handy. And
I think there's something pretty cool about it.
No, I admire it a lot. I wish maybe I can learn.
When you're around it, because it's a lot of people are not around. I'm not even around it that much. No. But when I'm around it and I'm around like a traditional man that can do like a carpenter or something like that, and just anything happening in the house, there's like, oh yeah, I got my tools in the truck. Yeah. They're just cutting wood. Yeah. And it's like, there's something very magnetic about that to me.
It's awesome. Yeah. I've built furniture like in kind of a carpentry capacity, but I've always had someone leading the charge. Like I don't know how to do all the design. I can just do what I'm told.
And then that person gets because I remodeled a house because I was like young and, just didn't have a lot of money to be spending on having someone else do it. So I like put in new floors and, didn't do like extensive stuff, but I like learned how to do the stuff. I bought a house when I was like 25 or 26 or something. And it was kind of like a hoarder was there. It was all beat up. It was like not in a good condition. And that was one of the things that I got to experience with that an artist gets to experience, or, a carpenter or anything of the sort, where you get to step away from whatever it is you did. Like if you put the floors in this house, every time you walk into this room, there's this like deep fulfillment.
Yeah. Right.
And it's very hard to be able to like quantify or even put into words. Yeah. But there's a sensation of like, I did that. And that is something that I think there is a massive vacuous kind of sensation for a lot of people. And they don't really know why they feel like there's a void. But I think there's a lot of old traditions that we've just lost that are inherently fulfilling.
Yeah, we are creators, right? And so
it feels so good.
Yeah, it is. It's like staring into the campfire. It's just something we've been doing for so long.
But now the campfire very literally has been replaced with like the digital. Like at my place, I have like the YouTube. My most watched YouTube channel is the digital campfire.
Yeah, we have like one of these fire pits downstairs, but it's, a light switch kind of thing. And it's like, it's just not the same.
It's not the same.
Actually, I'm having my fire pit shipped here. So I'm going to be building some big gnarly fires the old fashioned way, chopping the wood. And
the types of stories that arise when you're looking at us.
Like and then the steaks you can cook on the fire.
It's so good.
Unmatched.
Yeah. So so that's another thing. It's like looking up at the stars. That's something that, what percentage of time do people spend actually looking at the stars anymore? Where much of our ancestry and history, we spent like every night looking up at the stars. And when you're looking up, because your eyes are neurological tissue, they're continuous with the brain. When you're looking up, that stimulates things like creativity and it stimulates energy and kind of like
and wonder,
and wonder. It opens you up and like, oh my God. That's why when someone in like neurolinguistic programming stuff, the suggestion is if someone is lying, they'll probably like look up, either left or up to the left, up to the right. There's a suggestion of, I don't remember left or right more, but generally the looking up is the part that's the most relevant. And if you're looking down, then you're looking into information that you have like stored, so that's like, it's a kind of an interesting thing. If you spend time looking up into the trees, looking up into the stars, looking up into the clouds, it actually tunes your nervous system up to be a little bit more expansive and thoughtful and creative.
Interesting. Yeah, I do miss that. I mean, that was definitely stoked a deep sense of wonder in me as a kid, looking up at the stars in Tennessee. We spent a lot of time outdoors and just trying to fathom what all that was, like, what do you mean? Those are all suns. And like, some of them are actually clusters of billions of suns, like these, one dot in the night sky will actually be a galaxy. And that stoked tremendous wonder in me. And I do feel like it's tricky to keep that alive as you age. And maybe that is lack of connection with nature.
Well, now everything is encapsulated into information you're getting from a two-dimensional screen.
Yeah.
There's something really nice about the wisdom of you get of like, oh no, like if that snake bites me, I'm going to die.
Yes.
Puts you in
a flow state.
Yeah.
Flow or die.
Yeah.
Okay. I've kept you way too long already. Just as like something to maybe get towards a wrap up here. What are some modern health pitfalls? Like what we've talked a lot about this up to this point, but like, what do you think if someone is living in, the condo downtown, working in the cubicle 40 hours a week and not exactly getting their circadian rhythm dialed in and not exercising enough? Like, what are the biggest needle movers if you have to go one by one?
I think the biggest needle mover is relationships.
Relationships first.
Yeah, I think that would probably be the biggest one. I think you can live a pretty generally clumsy, domesticated, basic, artificially stimulated life. But if you have like rock solid relationships with people that you love and care about and feel like there's like a purpose within the tribe. Yeah. I think that covers a lot.
Is it harder to have those rock solid relationships if your health is in decline? They're like,
for sure.
So you're out of shape and you're not okay.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I'm just saying what do I believe is the highest?
First one's relationships, then
I think the first one is relationships and purpose.
Okay.
Waking up and being like, because it's like, that's like the fuel that drives you to do the things.
The mission.
Like who gives a crap about driving down to the, the IV place to get an NAD drip, and spend $600 on whatever. If you're like, I don't even like, why? What am I even doing here?
Yeah.
So getting out of that like numb, banal, disassociated place, which is depression, like we started off talking about.
Yeah.
I think it's like purpose, and typically purpose through relationships, providing value for other people and something that feels like meaningful.
That's why parenthood's so powerful. Because it gives you a big dose of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to keep these kids alive, and they are very serious relationships to have.
Yeah. And then the next one I would say is probably just like walking. Like you just need to walk your body.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting, we mentioned, I think before we're recording, there was research done by University of Southern California where they went out to, I think they also went to Tanzania, and they studied, I believe it was Hadza people, if I remember correctly, and they put movement measurement devices on their hips and knees and ankles and such, since they measured the amount of movement that they're doing and like the type of movement they're doing throughout the day. And they found that the people in these ancestral communities would rest. They'd be in resting positions about the same amount of time as people in the United States, like industrialized populations. It was 9.82 hours, if I remember right. But the difference in the way that they rested was they would rest. I'm going to change my position right now, not to prove a point, just because it feel good. But they would do that. So they would be resting in a kneeling position or a squatting position or a floor sitting position. They'd be in a 90-90 position, and they'd be in a straddle position. And, so they're still resting, they're hanging out, but they're naturally taking their body through this broader arc of movement. There's a book called Muscles and Meridians by a guy called Philip Beach. If you want to get like really nerdy about this stuff, I reference his book in my book as well, the Align Method, and he refers to it as tuning mechanisms for the body. And so most people's bodies are just cacophonous, like improperly tuned bodies. So there's a concept called tensegrity as well, which I think was coined by Buckminster Fuller originally. Okay. So tensegrity is like those. Have you ever been to a dentist office or doctor's office or whatever, and they have those expanding kind of toys where it's like you can like you close it, the whole thing shrinks up and closes, and you open it, the whole thing expands open. You ever seen that before? No. All right, well, whatever. You look up tensegrity. Okay. And so the human body is governed by tensegrity. That's like these like tensional networks of all of the connective tissue fibers.
This is back to opponent processing, right? Where the arm's pulling one way, but it's also pushing the other way.
Sure.
That's what gives you this kind of fineness of movement.
You could say
coordination of movement.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, and so it's all governed by these interconnected tensional networks and also pressure.
Yeah.
And when you are sitting in a chair, there's nothing wrong with a chair. You sit on the chair for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or even 10 hours. It's like you feel stiff when you get up, but it's not a problem. It's only when you stretch out the time horizon of the amount of time and days and months and years spent in that exact same position, that's when it starts to become problematic because you're always forming yourself.
Right.
So you will literally start to, there's something called sarcomerogenesis or sarcomerolysis, where you are lengthening the connective tissue or like the actual muscle fibers or shortening them based off of exposure of what your body's doing. So you can shorten or lengthen yourself into whatever physical costume you want based off of your daily movement decisions. If you are sitting in a chair for 10 hours a day, you're closing off the main lymphatic networks in the body, which is like the garbage centers or the waste management centers in the body. The biggest ones are the back of the knees and the inguinal and the hip region and the stomach, up in the shoulder, around the collarbone, up around the neck, and up around the armpit. So those are all places that through evolution, they were placed there in the body because they'll naturally get movement every time you just get up and take a walk. And so when you get up and take a walk, you take your body through this.
It's detoxifying.
It's detoxifying. You literally are taking out the trash. And every time you sit and hang out and you are binding those waste management systems, it's like you are binding, if the waste management system was analogous to your toilet or the plumbing at your house, it's like you're crimping those pipes. If you live in such a way where those pipes are chronically crimped up because you've backed yourself up and built yourself up into those positions, you are incredibly inefficient biological mechanism.
And so this, you're saying walking even more so than going to the gym?
Yes.
For this
if you had a choice between, if a person could walk, 8 to 10,000 steps a day, or not walk, 1,500 steps a day and go to the gym, the walking person's going to do a lot better.
And
that's what you see in almost every blue zone.
Walking on the ground, not on a treadmill, obviously.
Yeah, there's some treadmills that are kind of nice. Like there's a company called Assault Fitness. That's I think they're kind of cool, where they have like it's like an arc.
Oh yeah.
There's a few different companies. Assault's like the one that I've worked with.
They make the Assault bike too.
Yeah. I think I have a discount code. If people, I think it's Align. I'm not actually sure exactly, but if people like want an Assault thing, I think they're actually a good thing because you push.
Right. You are propelling.
You get off it and it's just done. So you are actually propelling it. So that activates the body in a way that mimics running on the ground a little bit more.
Yeah, man. I was really gung ho about getting the 10,000 steps per day. When we had a very walkable neighborhood we were living in, and now we're living in this place that's a little bit less walkable, and I've been off of it, and it definitely I'm missing something.
Yeah. You can even do little like lymphatic drainage massage. There's a video that we put up on our YouTube channel that goes through this guy called Perry Nicholson. He's like the OG person in the world of lymphatic drainage, which is very esoteric, obviously, but he goes to a thing called the Big Six. You can just look that up. And you go through and you start off and you massage around both collarbones, and then you go up into the neck, and then you go into the armpit, then you go into the abdomen, then you go into the groin, and then you go into the back of the knees, and then just kind of jump around, wiggle around a little bit. And your calves are pumps to circulate lymphatic fluid from lower body to upper body. So they literally act as pumps. So you can look at your body in all these different abstract ways. If you go Polyvagal Theory, you start seeing yourself as like this mammalian creature, that's perceiving threat or safety throughout the day and expressing it through facial expressions or tone, or they call it prosody of voice is what they call it. And you could also see yourself as kind of like a factory. And so you're like an evolutionary factory over millennia. And a part of the efficiency of that factory is like, like these things we call a gastrocnemius or a soleus or any of that stuff. It's like, yes, causes the foot to plantar flex, or, the release of it allows it to dorsiflex. And it's also tied into the lymphatic system. And it's also tied into your neurology. It's all an integrated system.
Is that why calves are notoriously hard to train in the gym? Like people are always trying to...
It's just a genetic thing, I think.
Yeah, they don't develop the same as other muscles, I guess, maybe because they have this.
I think it's really just they're more slow twitch in nature because of what they do all day long. But I think it's more of a genetic thing.
So relationships and purpose, walking, is there a third that you'd put on that priority list?
sunlight. I think light is probably the biggest thing. And if I could like integrate walking with getting on the ground, I think they're like the same level of leverage in a way. But walking is more like you can walk on the phone, do walking meetings, all that stuff, but also just get your ass down to the ground with regularity, make the ground inviting, put yoga blocks down there or yoga mat or a foam roller.
Yeah, we have a diwan outside. There's like a Middle Eastern sort of seating area. It's on the ground. It's really nice.
Yeah. So if you go to cultures, and this is a big premise of what I did with the Align method was there was like one thing in that book, a takeaway would be just like, just take your body to the ground with regularity. And what's happening within that, it's good for circulation. It's good for rehydrating all the connective tissue around your ankles and your knees and your hips and your pelvic floor. Pelvic floor dysfunction is a much more of a rare event for cultures that spend more time on the ground. Osteoarthritis in the hips and the knees is not really so much of a thing. Fall risk in elderly, it's the number one leading reason for needing assisted living. That just disappears, goes away. Like just getting down on the ground for the economics and overall sovereignty and agency of the country is one of the greatest, highest leverage things that people could possibly do. Like get your grandparents on the ground, get your parents on the ground, get yourself on there, like just stay on the ground, which that's biblical as well.
Yeah. Like ask them to go to the ground, right? Don't push them into the ground.
Yeah, whatever. Depends what they're into. But that's another biblical reference, which I don't remember it is. I feel like you're better with references in the Bible. But there's something around like being close to the ground. There's something very, because I referenced it in my book, which again I wrote like 6 years ago, so I don't remember what it was. But there's something about the people that stay close to the ground will be, healthy and they'll have access to God and this and that. I don't remember exactly what it is, but there's something about being in the ground in the Bible.
That's interesting. I will say that while I was part of a mastermind recently, and one of the things they had us doing was doing a daily prayer on our knees. I used to just kind of pray, meditate and sort of sit up and have the prayer, either out loud or sometimes just from the heart, but actually getting down on your knees and praying, there's something really powerful about that.
Oh yeah. Well, you're cleaning yourself. So you're cleaning your energy, from like a religious kind of metaphysical lens, but you're taking all of those main pivot points in your body, which are concentrated with all of the waste management systems, and you're flushing them out.
Interesting.
So you get up from that position, you're like, oh, cool, I feel like a little bit better.
Wow.
Because you've literally, it's like you're looking at the trash in front of your house building up. You're like, this is fucking disgusting. We need to do something like this. And the trash man comes through, picks it up.
Amazing. So cool. Again, connecting the modern to the ancient like that.
And the other one would be light. I think light is, and I think that these all probably, are stacked equally in a way. Yeah. But you need to get your light right, in my opinion.
Internal light environment, you mean?
Expose your body to as much sun as you can possibly handle throughout the day. And like I very, very strongly believe that the body is very intelligent, and the body senses when something is not good. And if you feel like you are starting to get enough sun, or too much sun, you get all the signals. Yeah. Your body's like, enough sun. You're like, cool, yep, enough sun. Yeah. Don't go past that.
For sure.
And try to fill your cup. It's just like hydration. Like when you take a pee, you want your pee to be kind of like, clear yellow-ish. You don't want it to be like bright stank orange all the time. So you drink enough water to be quenched. Yeah. Start to negotiate your relationship to light as actually being a physical material thing that your physiology consumes. Yes. And it's like I want to consume the light, which all this stuff, this gets into old conical books as well. Sure. And so that would be something that would be a really major thing is like consume the light, embrace the light. Yeah. Go out, get it on your eyeballs. Like remove your sunglasses during the day. Please God. Yeah. If you're wearing blue blockers, like please, like blue blockers or glasses in general, but blue blockers in particular are for after the sun goes down to protect you from the non-native blues coming off of your light bulbs. Yeah. And once the sun goes down, it's very intuitive. It's very simple. I think when things get too complex and like they go outside of like what just a normal natural person would intuit, it gets a little weird. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You've been running on the circadian rhythms of the sun comes up at a certain time and it goes down at a certain time. After the sun goes down, most of what you're exposed to is going to be reds and yellows and that high frequency blue light. It's just not, there's nowhere to find it.
There, right. That's why it's jacking you up and keeping you up late.
It's sending the signal to you that it's time to wake up.
Right.
And it's not even like a full spectrum signal, direct current signal that you get from the sun, which is incredibly therapeutic at the right times of days. You're getting like this non-native kind of junk light.
Yeah.
And so you're getting this very stimulating, irritating, like these lights, if you were, that we have right now, if we were in bed, you know, probably not together, but if we were in bed and we started to acclimate our eyes to, okay, cool, it's dark. We'd start releasing melatonin and we'd start down-regulating cortisol and that stuff. And you'd be like, okay, cool, it's cool, it's cool. If suddenly you turn one of these lights on, you're like, it's almost like someone's like violently like hitting you with light.
Yeah.
We're used to it because we've acclimated to it.
Right.
You know, but like that, like that's what your physiology and your own like nervous system, all the parts, like that's what it's experiencing. We're just accustomed to this stuff. We're normalizing that which should not be normal.
Well, it goes back to that quote, right? The Paleolithic, it was Paleolithic emotions, but I guess you'd say it's Paleolithic physiology as well. And then these technologies are just so new, or we haven't caught up to it, right? So it's still hijacking our hormonal pathways. I don't think so.
Because it's too fast. Like
it takes too
long.
Yeah.
So you'll probably end up just getting, well, I don't know, maybe only the super like strong kind of, you know, alien people that can sustain a super unnatural lifestyle somehow survive, and we create like a new species of Homo digitalis or
the Homo digitalis. Oh boy, that one sounds scary.
Yeah.
On the light topic, do you also subscribe to trying to see every sunrise and every sunset? That's what a lot of the...
I would. Yeah, if I'm around for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends where I'm at. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be the fastest way to improve your sleep and set your circadian rhythm.
Right,
and
sets your clock.
Kind of set your energy levels for the day.
Right.
Yeah, and then I think there's also something nice. So when you're getting that low solar angle light, you're getting more the long frequency reds and infrareds and, you know, the near and the far and all that. And it's just the whole spectrum of that. Think of all of those different frequencies of lights as almost like a different type of nutrient for the body. You know, and so you will spend thousands of dollars on getting a red, you know, near far infrared panel because it's really good for collagen synthesis. And it's really good for mitochondrial health. And it's really good for like stimulating your cells because it's literally providing energy for your body, for your mitochondria to spin up and turn into ATP. It's like it's like food. It's a photonic food for your cells because it's a physical thing that your body consumes. Yeah, you know,
that's a great reframe.
It's a really important reframe. Go outside and think of it as like, oh, I'm sunbathing.
Yeah,
like it's actually something I'm absorbing.
Yeah.
Do I want to block myself from absorbing it? Maybe. If I'm in, you know, Ecuador. And I want to use like zinc oxide or something to actually completely cover the skin and reflect all of the light back away from me. The ideal thing would be if it's too sunny and you're British, you know, or you're Icelandic or like Northern European somewhere, and there's a lot of sun. Iceland probably gets sun actually. Anyways, Northern European, whatever it is, you get a lot of sun. You're pale skin. Wear a sun hat.
Yeah.
Protect, like actually, and then if you're going to wear sunscreen, use zinc oxide or something that it just blocks all the sun. Yeah, it acts as like a shirt that you wear on your body. Right. I'm not going to get into what happens with sunblocks and sunscreens because I'm not like expert enough with it. But intuitively, it doesn't make sense to me to block out just a small percentage of the spectrum of light and also have all of these odd chemicals that I'm taking into my skin, but I'm not speaking on that in like an authoritative way.
Yeah, and then you also can just monitor what hours you go into the sun, right? Again, you know, before 10 or 11 a.m., after 3 p.m., roughly, depending on where you are.
Yeah, but the midday sun is good too. It's just, did you get too much?
Right.
So it's all of the frequencies are good.
Yeah.
So it's a similar concept of you know, limit the amount of, I don't think fat is good for me because it's $19.99. And I've been convinced that sugar is better and fat is bad. So I don't think sun at 12 o'clock is good for me because it's now. And sunblock companies have convinced me that like, oh, I got to really, really be careful about that. Again, I'm outside of my like depth and scope as like, I'm not speaking this like a super authoritative way. I'm just saying like, do your own research and listen to,
listen to your body.
But listen, the big thing is exactly like, if you've learned anything from the last 4 years, what you're being told is not always accurate.
For sure.
And your best interest is not always the interest of the person that's probably profiting billions of dollars off of augmenting your perception of things.
Yeah.
And the concept that we should be afraid of the sun, to me, feels very suspicious.
That's insanity.
I think it's insanity.
It's insanity.
And then you're living in a culture that's, kind of going insane.
Yeah.
And the correlation between skin cancer and sunblock, actually, I don't want to say because I don't remember the exact. I've had people on my podcast that actually are experts on this. And if I remember correctly, I think that skin cancer rates have gone up since the introduction of a lot of people using sunblock.
Yeah.
Do your own research.
Yeah, do your own research. I also have ball sunning and butt sunning.
Yeah.
Sunning in the nude, basically.
Yeah, ball sunning is good.
Dude, love it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like it's only the past few generations that have probably missed out on that. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know how far back it goes, but all of my equipment is very happy when I sun it.
Oh yeah.
So I try to do that daily as I get some ball sunning, get some sunning.
So the Leydig cells in the balls produce 95% of your testosterone, over 90, a lot of like most of your testosterone. And the infrared light that you'd be getting from the sun, depending upon the day, I mean, there's always going to be some of it, that penetrates the deepest.
Yeah.
So it penetrates through the skin the deepest. Intuitively, it makes sense to me that if the photons of this physical objective light is coming through and stirring up, penetrating through my skin and interacting with all the cells beneath the skin, intuitively it makes sense that, and providing energy for those cells and circulation and nitric oxide and all these things. Yeah. Intuitively, it makes sense that it would probably have some type of upregulatory effect of the cells that it interacts with.
Yeah.
And then there was research specifically with rats where they, so this is like whatever, it's just done with rats. I'm surprised there hasn't been research with people and ball sunning, particularly with infrared. But there's research with rats where they found an increased testosterone.
Yeah, well, my wife would agree. Like
cool.
It improves.
And nitric oxide production is a big one. So that gets into like nose breathing, humming. If you want to get a hard on in the morning, release more nitric oxide.
Humming.
So humming.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, nose breathing and humming would be two very fast ways to produce more nitric oxide. And it's also going to calm the nervous system. It's going to be supportive with more coherence within the heart and the brain. Like the systems start to relax a little bit. Doing massage around the hips and around the pelvic floor and all of that stuff is going to allow more blood to be able to enter the penis and the vagina or the clit.
Yeah.
So if you have backup and constriction around those areas, and that's going to potentially impede your access to being able to engorge those spaces with blood.
Wow.
And a body that's able to engorge well, they're able to circulate well.
Yeah.
They're able to clean themselves well. They're just more activated.
Yeah.
And that body evolutionarily would make sense for them to have harder hard-ons and, wetter vaginas.
Yeah.
And they're like, you guys should come together and make more of you.
Talk about being fruitful and multiplying.
Because whatever you're doing is working. So you got to put that into there and do this again.
It's funny, dude. Like hot Pilates and ball sunning, movement in general, but specifically like hot Pilates and ball sunning tend to be major aphrodisiacs for us.
Oh, cool.
Right? I don't know. Again, what you're saying, like the movement, the sweating, the temperature changes, and then the light.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. Like I highly recommend it to everyone.
Yeah. Pilates is pretty gangster. Like Joseph Pilates was a pretty like strong, robust human being that he was able to re-put his body back together with Pilates. But he was like a circus guy and a gymnast. And he was actually like and a very thoughtful person. He was a pretty gangster person. It's very interesting that Pilates is now almost exclusively excluded to women.
No, yeah. It's
like actually like a very masculine practice as well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fascinating how that worked.
Yeah. Again, kept you too long. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for the audience? And could you also let them know where to find out more about you and your work?
I don't think so. I enjoy conversations like this. I think that I think the thing that's like the most important thing, I think would probably be just to go outside more, make eye contact with people, like make a point to connect with people. Sometimes I think like the idea of feeling like you never know the difference that you may or may not be making in somebody's life. And and people are so deprived of human connection just generally in the modern culture that we live in. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And a lot of people that you think are the least deprived are the most deprived. I know because, again, I've had the opportunity to have pretty intimate exposure to people that are the kings of the planet. That like, there's no way you have any problem. You have everything you possibly could have and more.
Everybody's got problems.
And oftentimes it's like almost exacerbated for some reason.
Yeah, right.
And so every person, it's like be kind because every person is fighting a great war inside, or however that goes.
Yeah. I
think like leading with that, I think is a valuable thing, and perceiving people as adults, as children wearing adult costumes, I think is another good one. When you look at somebody, especially if you think someone's like a jerk, or someone's like a jerk or an asshole, or whatever the thing is, they're a hurt person probably.
Yeah. Hurt people.
And that person actually is the person that needs the most support. Yeah. And it's the hardest thing to do. Yeah. And the person that you have the most like trigger or even like hatred for probably is a person that has a significant amount of lessons for you.
Yeah.
And so, but that's like more Jedi shit that I don't know that I've fully graduated to. But in theory, I think that makes sense.
The triggers are learning opportunities, right?
Never waste a trigger.
Yeah, it's triggering you for a reason. You need to investigate that about yourself.
Yeah, and then if people are interested in learning about breathing, I created what I truly believe to be the most comprehensive breathing program, and I don't feel bad pitching because the first week of it is free. So you can start the first week, and that goes through. The reason I think it's the most comprehensive is it actually breaks down mechanics of breathing. And so that's a thing when I see if I go to a yoga class or a weightlifting class or, whatever, meditation thing, very rare are people educated on the mechanics of how to breathe well. You go through do 5-7-8 breathing, or do box breathing, or do holotropic breathing, or whatever. It's super rare to get any education on like, where should my ribs be in order to be able to actually like even access the strength of my diaphragm, or get it out of a chronically flexed position or extended position or whatever. Or like, what does that even mean? So the first week of it, that's the main focus. Then we go through, teach people how to calm the nervous system with your breath, which is a really big deal. And then how to stimulate the nervous system. So people want to try that. That's at alignpodcast.com/breathe. And then people could take the breathing archetype quiz that we made, which I'm excited about. So you go through, you get subjective questions, and you get 2 breathing tests. And it's an integration of the subjective with the tests, because the way that you breathe affects your mood regulation, how reactionary you are, how quick to like anger and things like that you are. So people want to do that. That's alignpodcast.com/quiz if you want to do like the quiz and kind of see where you're at with your breathing. And then, whatever. I'm Aaron Alexander on Instagram, podcast, Align Podcast. That's my whole thing.
This has been fun.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
We'll do it again.
Let's keep doing it.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.